3000.
What is doing? My name's Maloney. This is the 3000 podcast. I'm joined today for the 100th episode for a very requested guest. We have Trem here from the other side of the bay. Thanks for coming, man.
No worries, man. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, man, you've definitely been a very requested guest, and I appreciate you taking the time. I know it's not easy for you to get here from all the way over there, but you've made it, and it's going to be a great chat, I'm sure.
No issue, mate. I'm a bit disappointed, though, number one, that you don't have a cricket bat. 100th episode, raise the bat.
Yeah.
Ton them up.
Ton them up.
Congratulations to you.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
That's dope.
And it's always good when I reach out to someone and ask them to come on and they've already are familiar with the show, which helps.
Yeah, 100%.
So that's cool.
Yeah, really familiar with the show. Love everything you're doing. And from the time you spoke to me, I was like, yeah, I'm keen to get down with that. Full disclosure, though, I maybe tended to feel like a bit of an imposter at the moment, in particularly living in G-Town, but it is still a 3000 postcode, but also coming from Sydney initially. But hopefully I did enough damage in Melbourne to warrant being here, man.
Yeah, no, you definitely did. And as this show grows, and obviously it's 100 now, as it grows, the holding people to being long-term residents of 3000 might be a little bit easier on that, as long as they're interesting. Okay. And you get that.
Yeah, of course. But I love the fact that as we was talking earlier, just about how the podcast 3000 was predominantly Melbourne-based stuff, not necessarily hip-hop-based stuff, and I think that's what made it so awesome early with some of the guests you've had on. So dope.
And each guest kind of opens the door for someone else.
No doubt.
So there's a lot of people that ask for LC guests. So hopefully after you do one, maybe someone else, or maybe someone else who potentially has thought about it. I think after having Bias on, there was a few people like, hang on, maybe I do want to do this. Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, well, hopefully, and you're right, if it opens the door to the next ones that maybe weren't exposed to the podcast or were having second thoughts about it. So
yeah, that's it. That's what it's all about. All right. Well, man, you did mention Sydney. You grew up in Sydney. Well, you were born in Sydney. You spent a bit of time there. So let's start your Trem story at the Sydney stage.
The Sydney stage. All right. So, born in Sydney in the early 70s. Grew up there as a youngster. Predominantly kind of in a northwestish area, Meadowbank, West Ryde area around there. Yep. I'm not too sure if you're familiar with that region, but
I don't know a lot about it.
Nah, yeah, just sort of before Parramatta as you're heading out in that sort of northwest area. Mm-hmm. That's about it, really. Just living life in Sydney as a young taco, loving life. So.
Exposed to hip hop there at all?
Yeah, definitely exposed to hip hop eventually. So I was still there in the 80s when that first wave hit here from a hip hop perspective. But probably before that, I was definitely into all manner of other stuff, sports and whatnot. But when that first wave of hip hop hit, it definitely opened me up big time.
So we're talking rugby league. You're in rugby league territory, or rugby union league?
League. I played league as a really young tacker. Sort of my first sports was league through school and through a club footy. I played for Ermington Rydalmere. And then I ended up, while I was still in Sydney, I ended up playing Aussie rules. Mm-hmm. So I also played cricket too. And a mate I played cricket with, his dad was kind of a team manager for an Aussie rules club up there, and
was that unusual there?
80s, man. Like
Sydney had just moved.
No one knew anything about it, really. Yeah,
Sydney only went there in 84.
Sydney had literally just moved. Yeah. We were lucky enough to have Barry Round come out and coach us for periods throughout because we were kind of a foundation junior team. But it was awesome, man. I played sort of league and Aussie rules for one season, and then I made the full transition over. Partly because my stepdad, who was Victorian initially, he'd come up and shacked up with mum and he sort of said, eventually we're going to head to Victoria. They know nothing about league because this is well pre-storm.
Swans had only gone there, so it's very pre-storm.
He said, so you might want to learn to play Aussie rules. So anyway, ended up playing that up there, loved it. And
you got a good frame for that game though as well.
For
footy,
a little bit, definitely, It probably, although my skills probably weren't as good as some of the kids that were naturals and played it from under 9s or whatever, picking it up at an under 11s level or whatever it was, I was probably a little bit behind the 8 ball there, but definitely loved it, and funnily enough, 360 getting back around. I'm now coaching junior footy and It's awesome. It's awesome.
For sure. So when you know that you're coming to Melbourne, so you start to prepare, I'm going to play footy, you start to sort of check out of Sydney, you're like, okay, and hip-hop's on your radar, but you don't even know what to expect Melbourne from an arts perspective or from a culture perspective.
No, well, so, yeah, on top of that, by the time I got down here when I was 14, pushing 15, hip-hop was definitely a big part of me anyway. Mm-hmm. So I was there for that kind of initial scene that hit Sydney.
Yep.
Being out where I was and being younger, I wasn't really a full participant. I started dabbling with graph and breaking and stuff when I was in Sydney. But I saw that first wave that hit basically as a youngster, which was phenomenal.
Yep.
So definitely grabbed me when I was still at school was Subway Art came out when I was still at school in Sydney, dropped in the library, and I remember the book was bombed.
Really?
Yeah, incredibly. Yeah, it was hard to get.
Kids weren't pinching it, but they were bombing it.
I think they were doing both. So, yeah, I mean, I've heard it said that was the most racked book around the globe. But
makes sense. I
don't think it, how many times they had to re-up it in the school library, I have no idea. But this is kind of 84, I think it came out. So it was crazy. Local crews in the area were already getting busy and, definitely through graph and breaking initially in that first wave. And the music was sort of a part of it, but as far as getting involved in it we were a long way off still at that stage. But yeah, busted a few little tags and was just overwhelmed and inspired so much by what was happening. And
what word are you using at this early stage?
What word? Well, at first I just started doing characters. Oh, so right. we were kind of manipulating boomboxes and making them look funky and cartoony. And then I remember we all started busting these weird characters that had like kind of long beanies and big goggles. And so I just started fucking around with the characters initially because that's kind of what everyone was doing and manipulating them to suit. I couldn't even tell you. At the time, real spacey names were all the rage.
Okay.
So, I don't know. Like I remember I did like a Dr. Funk piece on a fence down a laneway near our house, just a one colour, almost a throw up with one of those characters.
Like on a timber fence.
Yeah, on the panes.
Yeah.
Just on the fence. It was crazy. But and funnily enough, I just pinched a can out of our. We had like a little tin shed. We lived in a commission house in Ermington at the time, and I just pinched a can of Duplicolor or something out the back and rode the pushy down to the laneway and busted out this little piece. But it was pretty cool. The area I grew up in, although I wasn't like in the city where it was huge through all those inner city crews in Sydney, there was a fair bit of damage getting done and enough happening locally from a graph tip that was awesome to coincide with what was happening in Subway Art and Beach Street at the time, which definitely got us open. But there was a crew called West Ride Boys, which was kind of the local group. And I remember there was two kids I went to school with. One was a year older and one was younger. And the younger one, who became a writer called Mayhem, he and his older brother Metro, who was affiliated with DMA, and he was kind of up in. He actually became KOA, which was Howe's crew, Howe from Coolism.
Yep.
But I remember Mayhem, his little brother, was at school, and I was standing in the canteen one time. This is in primary school still, early 80s, probably 84. And he had one of those Legionnaires caps on with the back bit, and the back was all pieced, and it was bananas. And I just remember staring at it in the line going...
Like you do at the back of a jacket, but it's on a Legionnaire cap.
Yeah, in 84, in the canteen line in primary school. Wow. And he said, yeah, my brother did it. And I was just like, fuck, wow. But just bonkers, for the era.
Like Poscas or what? How is he even doing that?
Yeah, it would have been Poscas and markers and whatever he could get his hands on at the time, but it was phenomenal.
That's a cool direction for some merch there.
Yeah, Legionnaires caps.
Like back rockers on the back of Legionnaires caps.
Definitely. Wow. But so that there was enough stuff happening. But getting back to the cricket and footy scenario, so the guy who I played cricket and Aussie rules with, Tahi, his dad owned a video store in Victoria Street, West Ryde, and Tahi was saying to me, there's this movie coming out, Beach Street. and so they had all the, we used to get those videos that would show just previews of movies coming out back in the 80s. And I remember watching the preview for Beat Street, and it was just like, and as soon as his dad got it in, I got it, took it home, and dubbed it, and that was that. So the combo of that Subway art and what I was seeing locally was it.
Because so many people of your era, you're a little bit older than me, said Beat Street is where they kind of, first saw it. But you were into it before that. That was just giving you a more like a video element.
Well, it was all kind of probably in the same 12-month period, I suppose. So as it was, you were hungry to see where else you could get it from. Mm-hmm. You were limited from watching the trains on a show that maybe be based in New York, Welcome Back, Kotter or something.
Yeah, they used to start.
Yeah, I think there was a Peanut piece there, and early shows like that, and then the video clips that you might have been lucky enough to see where it was Blondie, Debbie Harry, and there was some piecing in the background and stuff like that. So there was bits and pieces of it, but we were just so hungry to get as much of it as you could in kind of '84 as this burgeoning monstrosity of a wave was hitting our shores, I suppose. So,
for sure.
Yeah. And I was just such a massive fan of it all at the end of the day. It was just, as much of as you could take in, you would take at the time.
And I guess it's hard for people to understand that didn't live through that era how revolutionary and different this whole culture was. Like it was just something you'd never ever seen before.
Exactly, 100%. So I grew up, obviously, as I said, sports was, I was a sporty kid, massively playing sports. Would have loved to have got into BMXing, but I had some whack unisex bike that I tried to formulate into a BMX by, getting some yellow tyres and a yellow seat and some yellow hand grips, but it was fucked up.
But that was emulating the bikes you were seeing.
Yeah. I couldn't get a mad BMX, and musically, anything was on in the house. Mum wasn't musical, but she loved music. So, but it was predominantly top 40 kind of shit at the time. It could have been anything from Rod Stewart to fucking, who knows, ABBA. Yeah. There wasn't a lot of, deep musical culture in the house. Dad wasn't around.
There wasn't in Australia in general.
No, I don't think so. So, we're only privy to what we were able to get at the time. So, I was a Kiss fan in the early 80s. So my mum took me into Sydney Town Hall to see Kiss in the daytime. They did an in-store.
You just lost your Kings Connected sticker. Sorry, man. Yeah, go. You're a Kiss fan. A
Kiss fan. So, so Mum took me into Town Hall to see Kiss in 1980. And they just came out on the balcony, and Gene Simmons put his leg up on the, with his big demon boot on the balcony, and fucking everyone went crazy. And
again, it's something you've never seen before.
That's right.
It's
it was crazy.
There. Like,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was probably more into it because I had a cousin that was, he would make these crazy outfits that would emulate Kiss, and we would pretend to be playing Kiss songs together in air guitaring and shit. But that was kind of the closest thing I came to anything from a musical perspective, combined with sports, and then Beat Street hit and Subway Art, and it was just like, it just grabbed you, and dragged you in, and like many of us, I think at that stage, that caught on to the culture as a. I think that was what was awesome about Beat Street. Captured a fair chunk of the culture. Yep. So I didn't see Wild Style. We didn't have Wild Style. We didn't get Style Wars. I know they were out around the same time, '84, but it was pretty few and far between for anyone to have been lucky enough to get to see some old footage of Style Wars or Wild Style. So Beat Street, as much as people probably say, it was,
cheesy,
maybe a bit better than break-in or breakdance, but not quite to Wild Style standards. From a Hollywood aspect, it was all we had at the end of the day, and it gave us a glimpse of the music and the graph and the break-in all combined.
Yeah. And that probably got circulated through most video stores, where the other ones were a bit more avant-garde.
Correct.
They weren't as mainstream. So
that's right.
You couldn't get your hands on them.
Yeah, so this was a commercial release. So like I said, from the day my mate said, we got this video coming into the shop, and we saw the preview, it was just like, this is what I'm all about. Yeah. So...
and you're not worried about the content of the movie. You're not worried about the characters. You're just looking at the visuals and going, "Fuck, look at this."
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
The storyline's irrelevant.
Yeah. And the story, I mean, the storyline was a bit cheesy. There's a love story in there and all that sort of shit. And obviously Ramo dies at the end. But sorry for the spoiler alert. But it was just dope. It captured everything. And then that's when that grabbed me along with that whole era of kids, I suppose, that got into hip hop as a culture, not just the music or maybe not just the graph.
So mid-teens, you head to Victoria. You come to Geelong.
Mm-hmm. So mid-teens, head down to Victoria. As I said, my stepdad was from Vic originally. He wanted to come down to start his own business, and he said, "Yeah, we're going to head down there." So fair culture shock coming from kind of Sydney. I mean, I wasn't in a city, but I wasn't in the sticks. My area and my school was really embracing hip hop, and I was a massive part of that. And then moving down to G-Town, which back then in the mid to late 80s, was really just a big country town. Some might say it still is by comparison to some cities.
Ford and the Cats ran.
Ford, Shell, Refinery, and the Cats, and that was it. So it was working class.
Very industrial little city as well.
Really industrial, but with a bay and a beach. So beautiful city, so much potential.
Always had potential.
Amazing potential even back then. So yeah, we came down there and I was just like, what the fuck is this? But it also opened me up to, you could probably get up to a little bit more mischief in other ways. I was able to have dirt bikes and shit like that. But definitely from a hip hop perspective, there was nothing there at all when I first moved there. So,
but from a sports perspective, there's a lot.
Massive, yeah. But that was funny as well because kind of by the time I was 15, hip hop was really taken over from the love of sports, and they went from being a 50-50 to hip hop really taken over from sports. Mm-hmm. Once I stopped playing footy and cricket, I played basketball for a couple of years because that had started to seep in as well in the sort of around 1990. Mm-hmm. But but I guess hip hop had grabbed me enough then that it was probably disappointing that there wasn't a hip hop scene or culture or really an inkling of it there. Yep. But the sports side was so massive, and I'd already started to fall headfirst in love with the hip hop culture over footy and cricket. And
did you know that the V line was only about an hour and 20 minutes down the road to take you to where hip hop was a thing?
Yeah, well, initially no, but probably within 12 months, yes, massively.
So you didn't know, at first you just thought, Geelong's where it is.
I just thought we're sort of stuck here. And my stepdad, he came from the country, so his family had a property sort of half an hour out of Geelong again. Right. And that's where kind of the bikes and learning to drive as a 15-year-old and all that sort of shit came into play. But we went, the thing that did open me up to Melbourne graffiti ultimately and the culture in Melbourne is we went to Sydney back for a holiday, 12 months later or whatever, and we used to catch the train up. And I remember we were going to Sydney and we went to Spencer Street and the Remand Centre had just been done, that whole block had been done. And by this time it must have been 87, I'm assuming.
That backs onto the line of Spencer Street that goes to
Correct.
to North Melbourne.
Correct. Yeah. But because we were going into state, we got there an hour early, 2 hours early or whatever, and I just went for a walk up the street and happened to see the graph. And then I just wandered the whole block. And because we were going back to Sydney, Mum had her camera or whatever. I had it in the bag, and I just took photos of all these pieces, and that's
a whole city block there. Yeah,
whole city block, massive. It's pretty well documented now. I think there's even a video around of when maybe some of the guys were doing it on YouTube, but that was another level again. And by that stage, I think it was probably about 87, but some of the pieces on that wall, on that block, were mind-boggling. Mm-hmm. From the AKA stuff, the Ransom and the J Murders piece, and the claim to fame stuff, Paris and Peril, and then you had Wisp and Spy and Disguise, Bondi, Chrissy.
You got to photograph this, so you could study them. It's not like it's just all these colours. You could go home and
I studied.
This is like your own little Subway art book.
Study's a good way to put it. Yeah. Maybe blatantly biting.
Well, either way, you had your own
take that arrow, that connection from there. But yeah, 100%. And it was crazy because I was looking forward to going back to Sydney to to do exactly this. And before we even got on the train to go back, there's an entire city block full of the baddest burners. And I came to find out later there was even some Sydney guys had come down and painted there as well. Right. And that was the next level again.
What year is this? Like 91 sort of?
No, 87.
So this is still early.
Yeah, this is 87.
Early. Wow.
Yeah, I'd say it was 87. As when you hit 50, mate, your fucking brain starts.
So let's say late 80s.
It'd be 87. It'd be 87. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And so that's early days to see full color legal burners as well.
Yeah.
Real early days.
Yeah. Yeah. And the work that was being done, something changed. I think with the styles in almost 12 months. Where I think in Australia and in not that I was privy to much Melbourne graph prior to 87, but if you looked at what was going on in maybe 84, 85, 86, to then that jump up in 87 and 88, something shifted ridiculously in this city. Like, it was phenomenal.
Is it the tools a bit as well? Like the colours, there was more colours being available with different nozzles, or was it just people leveled up their game?
Well, I think it was more the style, like the actual styles just leveled up, 100-fold. It was outrageous the how much the styles elevated. I think obviously colours and shit like that has something to do with it. We were always pretty limited here in Australia in the 80s with what our paint selections availability was, but I've since learnt that a lot of heads in Melbourne had access to warehouses and shit where they had this mad floral paint and these other types of paints that like wet looks and that where you had pinks and purples that wouldn't, were never seen of in your normal over-the-counter shit that was available. And I think some big heists got done along the way and
things happen.
They had access, things happen where they had paints that you could only look at and go, what the fuck, how did that colour come about?
Yeah. So when you eventually go to Sydney on that trip, you're like, all right, well, Sydney's cool, but I want to get back to Melbourne because there's stuff happening here. Yeah,
so we went up and I photographed a lot of good stuff up there as well, but yeah, something had shifted in my appreciation of what was happening an hour up the road from where I lived. Yeah. And then the monthly, fortnightly, weekly missions started, and then by 88, I was coming up every weekend basically and use Central Station and walking the lines and everything sort of thing, taking photos and
just soaking up the culture.
So
you go to Central Station, are you buying records or are you just hanging out that you are buying
but I started off buying tapes and then I jumped to records. I only had a shitty belt drive or one of those all-in-one systems with the shitty deck on the top.
Up to,
and that was how I bought my music. I had a couple of variable boom boxes prior to that, so tapes was the first format. And then caught onto radio stuff and started to go from there. Caught one of the City Square jams as a youngster.
Yep.
Didn't know anyone, just a kid. Didn't know anyone in Central Station. Used to go in buy records. And then it just expanded from there.
Yeah. So you hadn't met anybody here
Not
that was part of it?
Not in 87 or 88. No.
Are you doing graph in Geelong?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you got your crew in Geelong?
Correct. Yeah. So as I said, when I got there was no one really doing it. And there was a couple of shitty tags around, obviously. But then the kids at my school started to get into what I was doing. And I got them involved, and then we started to paint a fair bit. So,
is that because it's a trend in popular culture? Is it because it's progressing more? That it's more in the mainstream. You're seeing it on the TV, on the radio.
Bit of both.
Yeah,
bit of both. I think the fact that I was doing it and they wanted a piece of it was maybe some of it. There's an element of excitement to painting, particularly doing it illegally as a kid. It's the next stage to the other sort of shenanigans you're getting up to as an innocent kid that's going out and maybe jumping a fence or whatever you're doing as a kid.
It's a sense of excitement.
Exactly, yeah. And so then when kids that would experience it, writing their name on something they shouldn't have, it became a bit addictive, I suppose. So, yeah.
As I know Geelong pretty well, but I wasn't there in those early days. when you're going into Geelong to the train station, there's that place where as you go over the bridge on the left, all the trains just sit there.
Yep.
Was that a thing when you were doing this, or is that a more recent thing?
The trains themselves or the walls that are there?
No, the trains. You know.
The bombardier there.
They just sit there.
Yeah, they never used to sit there as much. They used to lay up in the station, which was a lot harder to hit. But they do now. Just at that, just outside the station there on the right. Yeah,
it's crazy.
It's just off Packington Street. It's crazy there. Yeah.
So that wasn't.
Nah, not back then. Right. Nah. So what we ended up doing is the V-line trains were pretty hard to hit there, but we had mad access to the grain trains and the freighties.
And they were where are they going? All over the country.
All over the country, yeah. But two massive big holding areas out at North Geelong. So just as you're sort of coming into Geelong, you if you go a certain way, you can go past where they all are. So that kind of became our trains at the end of the day, and it was piss easy. You could just walk in and there's no fences.
Were you seeing other people's work from other states? And
yeah,
cities?
Definitely. Yeah, I remember a cab from Adelaide. He had a what was it? I think it said Master Blaster Kick-Ass Bomber. He had this mad end-to-end. It was like one of those kind of more square freight trains from memory. It wasn't
a shipping container.
Yeah, that came through town. There was a bit happening, and so, sort of more guys maybe from west side of Melbourne would come down and paint there a little bit. But yeah, you would get stuff from all over the country come through.
Was the Geelong guys territorial about their spots?
Only with the Geelong guys, and to be honest, probably it wasn't until more 89, 90 that we probably started to catch on to those freights and actually start to hit them. Prior to that, it was mainly walls and, what was maybe handball courts or basketball courts inside schools and parks and, boundary walls that back onto open areas, a few train line walls and stuff like that is what we were mainly hitting. But yeah.
So then when you eventually outgrow that, you go, well, there's a cool little scene here that you've helped create, but let's get to Melbourne and see what's going on.
Well, it didn't take long, as I said. So pretty much from that time that we went to Sydney, I was coming up fairly regularly and bringing a mate with me. So by 88, City Square Jam, Central Station, got to the Run DMC concert in 1988. So
where was that at? What venue?
Festival Hall.
Right.
Yeah, that was
Who
bananas.
supported them there?
Derek B and DJ Scratch.
Yeah, wow.
Which was odd. So I remember the flyer was billed Eric B and Rakim, which was...
Just a mistake.
Well, yeah.
Sell more tickets.
No, Derek B's name so it wasn't a mistake as far as Eric B and Derek B's name was on the flyer.
Right.
That's a big mistake though.
Yeah.
But yeah, whether I don't know. I've never heard the reasoning for them to not come, but it's a bit disappointing because no one knew until the gig that I didn't know until the gig that they weren't coming.
There's no fact checking on the internet then.
Nah, exactly, man. So we got there, but it was the Tougher Than Leather Run DMC tour, and was it Tougher Than Leather? Yeah, is that the fourth album? Is that Run's House? It was Run's House. It might have been.
We were looking at it just
it might. Anyway, they opened with Run's House. They came out to Run's House. It was bananas. Tougher Than Leather.
Are you 18 at this stage?
No.
You're still underage?
Yeah, 88. Yeah,
Is it
yeah,
an
still
all ages
underage.
gig? And you're...
All ages at Festival Hall.
Right.
And I remember standing out the front with my mate, Chris Helmore, and he used to write with me, and just watching all these Melbourne crews out the front with back patches, claim to fame with their, embroidered...
No Legionnaires hats.
No Posket Up Legionnaires hats. This was real deal now.
Right, yeah.
And I was just dumbfounded, I had fat laces in some whack sneakers and I'm just looking at dudes rocking the illest shit. Where the fuck did you get that from? And which was another problem being in Geelong and not really having many connects as far as where to get gear and shit. It was a hard toil.
Yeah, places like Geelong and even Tassie and Adelaide and stuff would get the shit that the department stores couldn't sell here the year before. They get it the next season. And we in Melbourne probably got the stuff they couldn't sell in the US 2 years before.
Potentially, yeah.
It was just like a trickle.
Yeah, it was so hard. Even getting a baseball cap, seemed impossible. You'd come to Melbourne, you'd be trying more, and you had to know, and that was what I started to find out as the next
Melbourne
year or two.
Sports Depot.
Yeah,
MSD.
so you had to find those joints, and as you said, you couldn't just Google where to find a dope cap.
It's funny that you went to that Run DMC gig. It's like a block from where the Remand Centre
Correct.
is. So it's that whole hip hop introduction was in that what sort of 3-block radius.
Yeah, for my Melbourne introduction, it really was.
Yeah.
And Central Station at that stage had moved from where I went to the old City Square Central Station, which is how I found out about the City Square Jam. And then they moved down to Flinders Street as well. So, yeah.
And was that when the Yellow Peril was at the City Square there?
Yeah.
It was, yeah.
And the graph wall was there. Yeah, it was bananas.
And people used to skate there a little bit as well.
They did, yeah.
So it was a real hub for all that
stuff. It was
stuff.
massive. Yeah, it was a bit intimidating. So as a youngster coming up as a 15-year-old at the time and not knowing anyone, it was a bit intimidating. But I just remembered going into Central Station Records when it was in under the back and, seeing the graph on the pylons and the hand styles on the dividers, and fuck, it was just amazing, man. Like, it's just
soaking it all in, and you're like, I need more of this.
100%.
Yeah. So you'd get down to Melbourne every opportunity you could.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And then my mates started to come as well, which was cool because initially I started coming sort of 1 out, and then 2 out, and then 3 out, and then we'd come up as a crew, and it was probably less intimidating, I suppose, depending on even just going to Richmond Station. I went there just to absorb it, when we first heard about the Riders Bench, and like that was an intimidating place if you didn't know anyone.
Did you? So the first time you went there, you just sort of hung around. You didn't go and say anything.
The first time I went there, I didn't even walk onto that platform.
You just looked at it from a distance.
That's it over there.
Yeah. Platform 13. I'm just over here. Yeah.
I remember because I didn't have any dope gear, and I remember my auntie had come back from Asia somewhere, and she had this bootleg Fila tracksuit. And whether it was Bali or Thailand or wherever she came back from, it wasn't original Fila. Yeah. Now Fila's available in Target these days, but back then it was like an elite sports brand that was hard to get. And she, God love her, she took like unpicked all the Fila logos, and I put them on my own jacket and stuff. And I remember I wore it to Melbourne. The first day I went to the Riders Bench, I remember I had a marker. We got to Spencer Street, got the train around to Flinders Street. Cops grabbed me and my 2 mates and, said, you look like riders or whatever. What have you got in your pockets? Like, rookie mistake. He's like, tapped it down, felt like a marker in the pocket or whatever. Took that off me, took our names down or whatever. And that was a bit of a go down straight from the outset. I'm like, fuck, I'm well out of my depth here. Yeah. And then went to Richmond Station and looked over at the Riders Bench Platty and looked at, the crews that were there, and I was just like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
But and bailed. Went down and out, and I think we went down to Swan Auctions and got photos of the old Peril in Paris that was down there, the original ones with the Eiffel Tower and that.
Yeah.
Crazy day though to come up and experience all that in
for sure
one hit.
But there is no real way that you can go and approach these people. You can't go up to them and go, hey, you guys are riders. We're kind of like, we're riders. We're from Geelong. Like, they're just going to go, fuck off. Like, yeah. So how do you break into the scene? You don't know, do you?
Nah, exactly. You don't know. And we didn't really meet anyone till probably 89 then, really, that was from Melbourne. A couple of guys were coming down to Geelong racking. So we met a guy, Open, and I can't remember his mate's name now. It's a long time ago.
Well, I guess if graffiti's not as prevalent, then the stores with the paint aren't going to be as onto it.
No, that's right. So they used to come down and go racking in all the Geelong stores, and we used to catch up with them for a bit. And I remember at the time I'd just learned, I had a lot of records and was trying to get into the music side of things, and I thought, I need to up the ante from my shitty little setup, and I need a drum machine. So I went into Brash's to buy this drum machine. And
they had drum machines.
They used to sell drum machines at Brash's. Yeah, okay. It was crazy. And little did I really know this drum machine probably wasn't what you wanted, but at the time I was like, I need it, and asked Mum, and I'm not giving you the money for it. And I was 15 then, so I was
been expensive too.
Yeah, it was. I can't remember what it was, but I remember those boys coming down from Melbourne. They were like, yeah, get a drum machine, and we'll make some music and that. And thankfully, it never happened, but they were short-lived as far as them coming down to Geelong, and it wasn't until a couple of years later that we started to really make mates in Melbourne and start to really unify. And
that's because of the graffiti stuff?
Yeah, 100%. So I'd started writing raps, but only sort of on my own. And then I had a piece in a hype magazine. and then that got seen by a few people in Melbourne, and then more heads started to come down to photograph the graph in Geelong, which my cruise was pretty much the majority of it.
Put them on the map a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
And that's the one with like the character with the cards.
The Joker. The court jester. Yeah. So that was in a fairly early hype. I had another little puck character, like a lizard, Bode lizard, in an even earlier one, but that one was the one that kicked it off, and then people started to come down, and then we sort of word travelled fast.
Did you submit it yourself?
I did submit that one. Yeah, an earlier one I didn't. Yeah.
So someone just sent it.
Yeah, I would have been one of the crew or whatever that sent some photos. But it's crazy because my partner at the time, Ray's, who he came over from England, so he's another story in itself. But he came to Geelong from London, which was pretty crazy. We joined forces, and he brought the crew RFK from London.
Yeah.
If you want to get into that, we can. But
you think it's a culture shock coming from Sydney? Imagine coming from London to Geelong.
100%. Yeah, it's massive, isn't it? Yeah. So he was originally from Melbourne. He moved to London, and then he was only there for a few years, and he came back, and funnily enough, he was piecing in Geelong without knowing my crew, and they kind of met him one day, and a couple of guys were out and about, and they bumped into this rider, and he'd already put up a couple of pieces I hadn't seen yet, and they were like, "Man, you got to check this dude's shit." And we went and checked it out, and I was just like, "Whoa, this dude's next level. He's not from fucking around here, And it was like, "No, he's from London." And that was awesome. So me and him started to get a bit busier, and our styles got better, and then the Hype magazine shit came, and then guys started to come down to Geelong.
Right. Does that give you credibility, like to go to the writer's bench and be like,
maybe, yeah.
Like, I'm in a magazine, man.
Yeah,
like, I don't know.
I probably wouldn't have.
This
is me, man.
But you know what I mean? At least people might know who you are.
Yeah, maybe not. But yeah, ultimately it worked out awesome in the end. So I heard of a few carloads of guys coming down getting photos. Even like I remember Ransom telling me later that him and Murmur from CR crew, they came down in a car and photographed our little Hall of Fame one time, and but it was Frenzy that was down that he bumped into some guys that knew us and told us about this guy, and that was kind of where the real connection came. And the amazing thing about that was he's a DJ as well, so it was like the double whammy as far as the link. It wasn't just a graph in Melbourne, it was a music in as well.
And Shan comes from a musical family where there's a lot of musical equipment there, so he had his hands on it.
100%, yeah.
I've asked him to come on a few times.
Yeah, he'd be a dope one, man, especially on the 3000 podcast. So entrenched, I mean, I know he's been all across the land since, but
he does come down this way during festive periods, Christmas and stuff. But
he would be a dope one, man. So I owe that dude a hell of a lot, because he it was meeting him that really kicked off our whole. It kicked us off musically from going from rapping into a tape deck over a pause taped instrumental to teaching us about equipment. It's about decks. Like, don't worry about that shitty old drum machine you're going to buy. Just get two of those, and a mixer, and buy doubles of Ultimate Breaks and Beats.
There's instrumentals on the back. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. And all that kind of stuff. So it was, he was amazing, and in opening us up to so much stuff, man. And then meeting other writers in Melbourne through him, which was dope. So
Melbourne's definitely where it's at, but you've still got to, because are you old enough to move out of
a couple of years later? Yeah. So the connection was there, where I was still coming up every weekend, and the more mates we made it easier to stay. And so a day trip turned into a weekend, turned into, long weekend, turned into,
And you're old enough now.
Yeah, 100%.
So you can go out.
Yeah. Well, I still went out underage a bit. So I'd met Shan and all those boys before I was 18.
Mm-hmm.
So, but
are they 18?
Shan was the oldest, as far as I know. He was probably a year older than me.
Right.
So
you're on the edge.
Yeah, I was on the edge. But we started doing shows anyway, where it was more of an all ages scenario. So he got us our first gigs, really, at the end of it. Well, actually, no, I tell a lie. I did do one gig, and I must have been probably 17. Before I met Shan, right, must have been the year of or the year before. Me and Rays were doing some stuff with a guy in Geelong. He lived out in North Lane, actually. Yeah.
Good spot.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe where Jess's mum is. Might have even been that street, yeah. It was a pretty notorious area. There's a group of shops out there called the Detroit Shops, and he had just a tin shed with 2 decks but they weren't like 1200s. They were just like shitty belt drives and a mixer. And he shared the house with his DJ and his missus, and I don't know how we stumbled across Jamie, but I think Ray's was the connection. He somehow met him somewhere, and we hooked up. And he said, "Come to our crib. We got a set up there." And his DJ basically just played instrumentals. There was no break beating, and he would just cut over it. And they just had a shitty mic that they would plug in. And that was kind of the first time actually where we started to just going from rapping out just in the park over a couple of beers or whatever to grabbing a mic and just rapping in front of the 10 sitting around the shed, you know. Like,
are you formulating tracks? Is there hooks there?
No. It's just
bars.
raps, just bars. Yeah. A lot of it freestyle. You know, maybe testing out the writtens you wrote that week or whatever.
And when people don't like them, you go, "Oh, no, I just made that up."
Yeah. And it was just the crew, really. You know what I mean? But it just gave it a sense of a theatre to it, I suppose, rather than just rapping.
And you're emulating what you're seeing on videos and that sort of thing, I guess, as well.
100%. And then when I was when we were hanging out at their place, I heard on PBS at the time, because Step Into the Aim was on, that, or maybe it was Wheels of Steel, actually. It might have been DJC's show. Anyway, that there was an open mic gig at the entertainment centre. This must have been about, I don't know when it was, but
the Geelong Entertainment Centre.
No, Melbourne.
Right, that's a big venue.
It was, yeah, but it wasn't on the main stage. There was just a side hustle they had going on.
I was going to say it's a big venue for an open mic.
Yeah, and anyway, so we just bit the bullet to come up and test our wares against, or not against, but amongst our Melbourne peers that we hadn't met yet.
As a crew?
As a crew, yeah, sort of. So this is before we met Frenzy, obviously. So Rays wasn't rapping then; it was just me and Jamie and his DJ. I was Tremor.
You weren't.
No. So he was MCJ, right, and I was Tremor, and his DJ was called A Mirage. So we came up to Melbourne, and it was crazy, because I still remember the day, and I've mentioned it before, about walking in and seeing Ransom and Choice Cuts at the decks, you know, and that was my local heroes. So it was a pretty daunting affair to get up, and then in the crowd was like Reason, who was starting to make some noise on radio, and his crew at the time, and I think Raf and Pace were there, and so it was pretty crazy. So we got up and did a little 10-minute set, and
but you knew who they were by visually looking at them. Yeah.
Well, I'd seen them. I've not been to a show yet. I might have even been to a show by then to actually know them by face.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
But they seemed to know what they were doing, and you're like, we're kind of coming into this a little bit.
There might have even been pictures in Vapors Mag at the time.
Okay.
So Vapors was an early publication, obviously, and Blaze had sort of done a fair bit of stuff on, you know, the up-and-coming Melbourne scene at the time, reviewing demos and stuff like that. But anyway, I knew what Ransom and Choice Cuts looked like. I knew who Raf was. I think I met Reason that day and a few others. So, but yeah, that was crazy. So that was actually the first show as far as getting up and rapping in front of maybe 80 people.
Mm-hmm. That's still good.
It was good enough for me, man.
How did you go?
It was good. Yeah. So to paint the picture, and it's funny because I hear a lot of stuff about, and not to get too political about everything, but it's funny how people talk about how non-multicultural Oz hip hop is, and I hate that term personally, but you know, local rap and how it's, you know, it's just white bread all day. And so this crew that I stood up with was me as a whatever I was, 16-year-old, a dude who was about 6'5", 7 foot basketballer, black guy from New York. So that was MCJ, who rapped with an American accent, and our DJ was an Indigenous brother, A Mirage, and that was the crew. Yeah. So it's like you can't really get more of a mixed race crew than that, you know.
For sure, I think that sort of stigma comes later.
100%. But I think when people refer to it and just say what it is, it's like you haven't done the knowledge at all, really.
No,
you know, so.
It was, and from what I can gather as someone who was too young at that sort of point in time, but it was a lot of ethnicities involved in that. And it was a lot
massively.
of Italians, Greeks. There was a
Yep.
lot of people from Europe. There was a lot of people from all sorts of places. And they just liked hip-hop. It definitely
100%.
wasn't anything that,
Nah, but it's funny. But I'm just thinking, if you at the time, if you could picture that now, that was the crew. That's what it looked like. And we did okay. It was we didn't sort of get laughed off. We didn't get booed off. A few of the guys that were in the crowd, had said kind words about me since, and we made some friendships that day, which was awesome too.
And that's what I guess it's all about. It's putting yourselves on the map, making some connections.
Yeah.
And then when you go back, people go, oh, yeah, we know these dudes.
That's right.
Yeah.
So by the time we met Frenzy in the next 12 months and then ended up back in Melbourne via him, a lot of those guys that were in the crowd that day were at least familiar with myself. So the DJ at the time and so A. Mirage and Jamie, they kind of stepped off and did other stuff. But I kept at it, so that was kind of cool to come back around and meet those guys again.
Yeah, and then you're just running solo now. You're just doing your own thing, and you're happy doing that. But you kind of need to meet other people if you're going to record stuff properly.
Definitely, yeah, 100%. And Ray's was kind of acting as a pseudo DJ with the pause tape status before we bought decks. And he was championing everything I was doing on the mic, which was awesome. But then when we met Frenzy, it just, it elevated massively. By then, Ray's had started rapping a bit. And we kind of formed a crew with Frenzy pretty quickly after catching up with him.
Yeah, and then but he inevitably moves to Sydney or Brisbane, then Sydney or something.
Yeah. Exactly.
How long after that is that?
A couple of years, which did throw a bit of a spanner in the works. But we'd sort of started branching out. We did those, as I said, those. So then the next lot of shows was with Frenzy as RFK as our graph crew, and we did like Monash Uni open days, and we did Pran Town Hall, and we did I don't know how we managed that one. We started to do a fair few shows, and gain a little bit of rep. But I mean, it's funny because those crowds back then were either 20 kids that were really into it that came there to see you, and then the rest were nondescript people that had no idea what the fuck was going on.
What is this?
You can imagine at Monash Uni in an open day where it's like, it was bananas. But
it's hard for kids to even understand when there wasn't a scene at all. Like now, if someone gets up at a opening of something and decides to rap, people know what it is.
Yeah.
Then people would have gone, what the fuck is
hell
this?
yeah.
Like people that had no idea.
Yeah, definitely.
Older people would have just been like perplexed.
100%. Yeah, it was crazy. So, but anyway, we made a bit of noise that way, and then just started to grow from there. Then we started to make a demo and snowballed, I guess.
Did the way that you were writing change? Did you mature in that sort of aspect when you started performing live as well? Because you've always been sort of writing them.
Yeah, probably didn't change. Probably just made me realize I had an audience. So or I had peers now that were catching on to what you were doing. So you wanted to make sure that your game was, your sword was sharp enough to be able to compete, I guess. So as far as doing it in front of an audience, no, that's probably not a lesson I learned until much later about how to formulate your raps or your songs or your show to suit the live performance.
You hadn't matured to that point yet.
Nah, definitely not. I was still just trying to spit 100 bars of the baddest raps.
So when you...
Probably still do.
So when you go to actual record demos... Are you are you like, all right, so let's just lift these beats off this. Let's just take a sample from here. Are you having a hand in production, or you're just saying I'm just writing it?
Not at the time. So when we did our first couple of demos with Frenzy, Shan was the beat man, and it was all OG shit. So he was sampling, and he's like, I've got this, and I put this with this, and I think this suits you guys. And then we would just rap. We'd be like, yep, boom, done. Let's do it. So, we made a couple of embarrassing demos, and, they got played once or twice on radio and, on PBS.
On PBS, Step Into the AM?
Yeah.
So did you go and give them to...
Yeah. So we were very proud as Punch at the time. So prior to that, I had a little demo that I'd made with Ray's, just the pause tape style one where Frenzy had played that in Geelong. He came down to DJ in a Geelong... some Geelong community radio at the time. I think they must have had a rap show. I can't really remember it, but he came down to be a guest DJ or whatever, and he played this god awful fucking demo that I'd done. It was hilarious. But
You're proud at the time.
yeah, I didn't intend for that to happen. I think Ray's had given it to him on the sly and said, "Oh, we did this. This is Trem." You know, this might have been before he'd even heard me. It might have been the first time he'd heard me. And yeah, he played it on this Geelong radio station, which is
So, but by this stage, you're thinking about structuring songs. You think about hooks and
3 verses and maybe no hooks, but yeah.
So no, it's just straight.
Just
bars.
let the beat run in the middle. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, okay. Well, there you go. But you're structuring it like a
3 verses,
a playable on radio
correct.
song.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which then will evolve to become more structured as
Definitely.
you progress. So where's the next step in this learning process?
So the next step in the learning process is probably then reassessing what we did do as a demo, and then go, right, where do we want to go with it? So it was probably about then that Shan bailed, and we started to work with Johnny Idem. And Idem had a little setup very similar to Shan's actually out at Gladstone Park at his joint. So we were working in Camberwell with Shan, and then Idem was from Gladstone Park, and we were going out there at the time. So I started buying a lot of records off Idem. He was kind of flipping a lot of wax. And
for those who don't know, he's like the guy when it comes to record collecting in Melbourne, or maybe the country.
Yeah, particularly then, I would say, yeah. A lot of heads from overseas have come to sit in his shop at the time or in his house at the time and buy stacks. Yeah. He amazing collector, put me onto so much shit. As did Frenzy, as did Lenny. You know, a lot of the whole digging aspect is probably something that talking to maybe a lot of people that are listeners or participants now that are on your podcast or listening maybe don't have that appreciation of what went into the digging process and what the process of the whole thing. But yeah, Idem put us onto a lot of that, which was awesome, and we started doing some little demos with Idem then. And that was about the time then Rays took off. So we were rapping together, and we did a demo called Arrest My Brain at Items, which I don't think's ever come out.
Is he sitting on it? You're sitting on it?
I'm not sitting on it. He might be. And then Ray's bailed. He went to Holland and Europe for, I think, 12 months. So I was kind of left holding the baby solo. So Idem was like, well, let's do a solo Trem release. And then we started to work on like a little 6-track tape, basically, which was going to be called Without Further Ado, which never eventuated. But, yeah.
Again, you recorded tracks, you had instrumentals.
Yeah, we had it. Yeah, and then what that over the course of time ended up becoming my first 212s ultimately, plus some change, plus some extras which never came out.
So, okay, who's sitting on those?
I've got some of those.
Yeah.
So we had the extra. I don't have the original demos from Items, but then once I started recording with Prowla, everything went to DAT tape, and then I've got those. But that's probably another 12 months. 2 years.
So when you're with the Item thing, it just didn't work for whatever reason?
Well, for whatever reasons. I mean, we're talking early 90s now, and probably my priorities changed a fair bit. So from being this hungry MC, wanting to do what I wanted to do, to all of a sudden this whole new world in Melbourne, where I'm up here now. And
you're living here now.
Yeah, ultimately, for the most part. And then, just the early 90s kicks into gear, and the whole partying and... still rapping and still doing shows and open mics and whatnot. But as far as knuckling down to finish the project we started was, a long way from priority.
So how do you meet Prowla to then start working?
So I'd met Prowla prior. So I met Prowla, I think the first time I met him would have been at one of those Monash gigs. So probably the first or second time I ever rapped in front of public. Prowse was there.
Just as a punter? Or he's there?
He didn't perform, I don't think, but maybe Mary, MCQ, which was his partner at the time, she may have. Pardon me. But, I mean, most of the who's who in Melbourne was out at those gigs, that was what was good at the time, is that if there was something on, that throng of 100 would be there.
It's an engaged community.
Correct, yeah. And the support was awesome. So I met him then, but it obviously didn't sort of transfer into much apart from catching up time and time again, a couple of times at gigs or whatever. And then I can't remember how we went to the next stage, but I do remember that I did see him somewhere one time and he was like, Trem, man, you tagged my mum's shop.
Really?
Yeah, and
You had?
yeah. Me and Epic had so where Prowla's studio was in Richmond in Swan Street, sort of at the top of the hill, just up past the Swan, and next to the train line. And we'd come back one time, and they basically had a Greek restaurant downstairs. Without giving too much away.
I know. I know where that is.
Yeah, and there's a wall at the back where there's a laneway that runs down the back, which was access to his studio, and we basically just drunk and bombed this wall or whatever, not knowing clearly. And he was fine. He was just like, don't bomb that shop.
Richmond, Burnley at that time, the whole place was covered in graffiti. It was everywhere.
Crazy, yeah. But we hit it off big time, man. And so I, for whatever reason, the sort of project with Item kind of flopped, and it was mainly my doing, but things kind of picked up again when Prowse had this studio in Richmond, and he's like, come and record there, or come. We started hanging out, and then I was seeing what he was doing with his tapes, and then Ray's came back from overseas, and then he said, I want to do this tape, and then we recorded that there, and then Prowse was like, you should start recording with us. So,
and is his studio a little bit more professional, or is it just an evolution of time because technology's getting better?
Yeah, a bit of both, I think. It's probably a year later, but instead of a sort of a cassette 4-track, he had a digital 4-track. Instead of, we were using like a keyboard W30 sampler, Roland W30 sample, which Prowse had one of them as well. He'd elevated to an Akai S1000, which was the next one up from the 950.
And that could take floppy disks?
Yes. Yeah. So, everything was changing. Plus, they had mad filters on it, and, it was crazy. So little things like that started to change. And so that was really inspiring, really.
It's crazy to think now that I don't even know how many, megabytes you'd get on a little floppy disk, but that was groundbreaking. You're like, wow, we can record multiple little
100%. Yeah, it was crazy. And I mean, I always used to, you think about the SP1200 and things like that and what was done with it, and they were just impossible to get here. Like that, we had, some people had maybe the 900, the 950 and the 1000, and that was about, and they were rack mount samplers as well. Yeah. But what you could do with them was pretty crazy. And what we did was we used to run it MIDI through an Atari ST computer
desktop
with the Cubase program, so you could actually see all your tracks. So
like a waveform,
not a waveform as such, but so you could actually sequence your track. So you could
like
have
your Fruity Loops type sort of.
Yeah, so you could have your kicks, your hats, your snares, your bass line, whatever like that. So rather than just doing it all internally in the rack mount, it gave you a visual, a bit of what your track was going to look like.
Like a grid almost.
Correct. So for sequencing that, it was amazing. That was like, holy hell. So you can see, instead of just, audibly muting the bass line when you wanted to, or you could chop it out, and it was like the early incarnation of all those gridded sort of DAWs now, So it was awesome. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And Jace was the master of that. Shem was awesome at that. So him and Prowse were working together pretty hard at the time. Mm-hmm. And so I just kind of ended up eventually taking my Creator Records over there and saying, I want to put this with this and that with that, and what do you reckon you can do with that? And we started getting busy on the Without Further Ado tape that I'd started with Item, 5 years later or whatever it was.
So did you say to Item, hey, can I get these vocals or can I get this? Or you just go, I've got this premise, but I'm going to just record it with these guys?
Started afresh. There was one track that we did that I'd done with Item, or I'd started with Item, and I ended up buying all those records off him so I could remake the track, basically.
Okay. Yeah. He had more records, that was fine.
Yeah. He had 5 of each one of them anyway, mate. He could have given them to me.
So you're recording with those guys, and you start to, and you're finding your voice a little bit more. You're doing, you're a solo guy now, right? You're not even thinking about the crew stuff.
Not yet, no.
And they're happy. You're a solo artist. It's easy to work with just you.
Yeah, well, ultimately I was. So when because Ray's had been gone, and Frenzy had gone, it was just me anyway. So Ray's had come back and he'd done his tape. And that was kind of the inference for where I wanted to go then next. And so we started the tape. So, it was like Ray's was solo, I was solo. That was just it. So, and basically I just had, kind of co-production with Prowls and Jace ultimately.
Which are good guys to have in your corner at that
Definitely.
point in time. So what is, if there is any, what is the game plan after you make this record? You go, we get it, we go and try and get it on the radio at PBS. What else? Like, what else could you hope to do there?
Yeah, well, at that stage, so we started to make a tape, an album ultimately, and then because that was just the go. So Ray's probably pumped out a couple of hundred tapes, all the stuff that Nuff said we're doing at the time. So all the Prowler tapes, I think he was probably doing a couple of hundred. And there was shops around the land that would sell it. You'd have one in most of the major cities, Brizzy, Adelaide, Sydney, Melbourne.
That's not much.
Not a lot, but it's 94 or whatever.
That's what I mean.
93. It's just to get it out there. It's not to, you're going to do your ass on it financially, irrespective of which way you do it.
It's about the art.
Maybe the tapes will pay for themselves from a production cost, but that's about it. And then you'd sell them out your backpack at gigs and whatever, really. That was how it worked. So we started on the tape, and then a couple of tracks in, I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's do wax. And Prowls, I think I remember him sort of saying, man, just finish the tape. Let's put the tape out. I was like, no, let's stop. I want to... And so this is probably over the course of 6 months, whatever, and I had it in my mind. I wanted to do a 12-inch now instead.
The CDs are out of the question?
Yeah. They hadn't hit yet. Oh, they hadn't really hit yet from a local product. Yeah.
They were probably out there commercially, but to actually burn them here...
Everything was still tape and wax, really, at that stage.
94.
So this is 90... Yeah, we're probably into 96 now.
Okay.
Yeah. We probably started 96, 90... let me think. When did it come out? 96, 97 maybe even. Mm-hmm. And I just sort of said, no, let's do a 12. So we got 4 tracks in, and then he said, oh, you're mad. But I was like, no, I'll do it. So we did the 12, and we did the Sheer Talent 12-inch, basically. So, and that was awesome. That was all of a sudden, I think, so it must have come out in 97, 98.
How many did you press?
I can't even remember, to be honest.
But you sold them?
Sold them all, yeah.
Not consignment, they were just gone?
No, there was a lot on consignment at the time. Yeah, so I'd like to say Obese might have taken 50, and other stores might have taken 10 at a time. Yeah. And we just did it like that on a consignment base. So.
And had you had a relationship with the Obese guys at that stage?
Definitely, yeah. So you're testing my memory a little bit now, so I'm just trying to think of dates. So,
but you're not just, what we're trying to get to is you're not just rocking in there with 50 records.
No, so by now I'd been entrenched in the scene in Melbourne for a long time, and even interstate. So I knew Hams at Rocking Horse, I knew Blaze at Next Level in Sydney. I can't remember who I knew in Adelaide, but there was a connection somewhere in every state, and I knew all the guys in Obese, yeah. And I'm kind of assuming that Strut was probably working there by now as well. So, Brad's another one that comes into the picture, as do Rob and Bob, which becomes LC, obviously. So we were all kind of mates by then and kind of hanging out and rapping together as well.
And this is still Shaz's time of Obese.
Yeah. This is like probably early Shaz's time of Obese, to be honest, yeah. So this is probably just... I don't think Ollie had the shop when I brought out Sheer Talent. I think it was Shaz. I can't remember, but I don't know when Ollie sort of got out and Shaz took it over. But.
Yeah, but it's in that sort of formative era, because even though there was hip hop shops around the country, but you could probably, like you said, rely on them. They might do 50. Like that was the shop for Aussie hip hop where people were coming to get their shit.
100%. So we had at the time, I think in Melbourne, what did we have? We would have had them. There was another store. There was a store called Vinyl Soldiers in the city near Daimaroo. That was Effects had something to do with that store.
Okay.
Yeah, DJ Effects had something to do with that shop. Yeah. Vinyl Soldiers, they were called. They didn't last long, I don't think. Who else was there? There was a shop in Chadstone Shopping Centre. There was a girl that came over from Adelaide. Can't remember her name, and I don't know if she managed or had some financial investment in this weird record store in the middle of Chatty Shopping Centre, but they took like 10 on consignment at a time, and
the one in the city. It wasn't with Dexter and us.
Yeah, that's the one. That Vinyl Soldiers. Yeah.
At a MSC there.
Yeah, that's right.
Had the ramp out the back.
That's right. Yeah.
So that was just the foyer going up to MSC, and they had the little spot.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. Vinyl Soldiers, it was called. Yeah. And I think there was somewhere else in Melbourne at the time. But anyway, there was enough places to get them out,
Yeah. And there was a demand at that stage because it was like so.
Well, I think the fact that it came out on vinyl, so there wasn't a lot of local product that was coming out on vinyl at the time. Obviously, you know, nearly 10 years earlier, AKA had dropped, and then probably 8 years later, their second and Mama's Funk, Rising Tarkees, 12s came out. But there wasn't a lot in between from a Melbourne perspective, I don't think. Prowl's, Prowl's had probably just dropped. I reckon Prowse might have dropped Wax in that time. So, because he had the recognition tape. And then what came next after that? Yeah, I think Prowse might have dropped something. And I think, you know, sort of, I don't know what Obese things dropped, but that was probably another year or two after that. Yeah. And Biases, but I think he's only came out on CD to start.
The Beeswax?
Yeah.
That wasn't until 98.
Yeah, so that's when Sheer Talent basically dropped. Okay, yeah, around the same time.
So it's a formative time.
Definitely, yeah.
And for what a lot of people wouldn't understand that aren't of a certain age, now there is a lane for that stuff. But if you told the guy at the coffee shop that you rap and that you're going to put a record out, they would be like, what do you mean?
I've never told the guy at the coffee shop.
Yeah, but that's what I'm trying to say. Like, it was just so underground.
Yeah.
The people within the scene kind of knew, but it just wasn't a thing, was it?
No, definitely not. I mean, it wasn't. And that's like when we first planned to do a tape, it was like you just pump out 200 and hopefully they sell and maybe they don't. And it was the same for the 12. I probably did 250 maybe of the first 12. And yeah, when they sold, it was like awesome. I think I did a little repress, maybe like another 100.
Does that recoup your money though?
It probably pays for the
pressing, but not for the hours.
Not for the hour, never for the hours that you invest. It probably didn't even pay. So when I was working with Prowse and Jace, I was just paying them an hourly fee to basically work in the studio, so for their production and recording. And yeah, so it wouldn't have covered that. Definitely not. And I was a bit of a perfectionist, and I've always been about the process as well. So I love being in the studio, and you know, I would record tracks twice, and Prowse would be like, done perfect, and I'd be like, I reckon I need to do it again. You know, he's like, man, what for, dude? That's like exactly how you want it. And I'm
paying you by the hour. I want to do it again.
Yeah. Let me have another go. Yeah. And I'd just record it another half a dozen times for the sake of it, and they mightn't be any better. But yeah, getting back to that process, I think that's one of the things that's really lost in today's music, especially from a hip hop perspective or a rap perspective, where I don't think these kids now, then, you know, they're missing out on a big part of why we were invested, you know, and what it took from the digging process, physical digging to find samples that were unused, and that was fun, right? And you might get home with 10 records and 9 might be shit and 1 would have the ill bass line. To the process of sampling them and chopping them up and, you know, truncating it and making it fit in the limited time frame you had to make your beat. And
so while this process is happening, you're not doing production, but you're learning from some guys that really know.
Correct.
So you're taking it in though.
So I'd take the bass line and go, can we sample this? Will that go with these drums?
So you just didn't have the skill set, but you
knew
what you wanted.
Correct. Yeah, 100%. And so I was learning firsthand by watching them, which was awesome.
Yeah. And so then you realise that what you were doing is you're teaching yourself down the track, I'm going to know how to do this myself. I don't need these guys. Not that you don't want them, but you're like, I can just do it myself.
Yeah. So eventually, so I did sort of I did 2 projects with them guys. So I did a second 12, which was kind of this, you know, I guess the middle third of the tape in the end. And we dropped that. And then Proud started to upgrade his studio. So me and Rob Nat bought his studio ultimately, and
everything, all the kit,
everything, absolutely everything. We bought
monitor speakers,
the screens, the desk, which I still use, the Allen and Heath desk, the S1, the Akai S1000, the keyboard that was with it,
How much did it cost you?
Even the Atari ST 1040.
Have you still got all this?
I still got it. Yeah, I don't use that part. I still use the desk. That's about it. But I can't remember what we paid for it, to be honest. A DAT machine and the digital 4-track, which, I lost too much sleep even just thinking about the nightmares of using that thing. Because it was basically a digital 4-track. So you had a jog wheel and a play button, sort of fast rewind, long rewind, and it was all, and numbers came up for where you are in the track, but everything So you wanted to bounce things from your track, you had to cut it. By ear, there's nothing visual.
I'm a visual person, and that would do my head in.
Oh, man, it was crazy.
Yeah. But then once you've got that, it gives you the keys to the city a little bit because you can just, all right, I've seen these guys do it. It can be done. I just need to put in the time to fucking learn it.
Yeah, 100%.
There's no manuals.
Yeah, I was kind of learning on hand with them, which was awesome to actually sit there and watch it unfold, working on your own music and then learning it firsthand. So by the time Rob and I got it, we were pretty prolific at using it. So,
and this is when you're in your sort of Elwood space?
Not yet. So when we first bought all the studio, we took it to Robbie's joint in Alphington. So he was north side, and we set it up there for a period. And he did his 12-inch there, and then I think he had to move out or whatever. But I got the spot in Elwood then, and we set it up there. And
that was your own studio. What did you call it?
What was that called in there? I can't remember what we called that, to be honest.
Trem's joint.
The Trematorium, probably.
Trematorium, yeah.
But burning motherfuckers.
I've had a few people come on that say that and we were talking about it a little bit earlier. I didn't know, but at that time I lived with my mum down the road. Then you had Checkmate, who was around the corner. You had Heater, who was around the corner. Yeah. That whole little area, there was a lot of people coming to record that all sort of lived in that spot.
Yeah,
and
it was
someone
crazy.
else you mentioned as well. I can't remember.
Well, I know that part of Elwood there was where DJ Breeze and Choice Cuts kind of grew up. And maybe even Disguise spent a fair bit of time in there. But so that dates back to real OG pioneering Melbourne hip-hop area. So to record, we eventually recorded the Stages set there. That was a pretty cool spot to do it at the end of the day. But I do. Sorry, just to cut you off. I do remember. So yeah, when we set that studio up at Robbie's, we actually called it the padded cell because we got all this like weird shit to acoustically. Yeah, like the acoustic foam, and it was like a padded cell, so we called it that, the padded cell.
I have actually seen that on the back of the record. Yeah.
Yeah, and then when we came to to my joint, it was the Trematorium. So, yeah. I think so, anyway.
Did you used to get down to the IGA liquor stores or fucking down the corner there?
Definitely, yeah.
It was a funny group of shops, man.
Yeah, that IGA liquor store pretty much catered to the Stages Set album, I would say. Yeah.
And it's still there, that joint.
Yeah.
It's, it was just like liquor store, cafe.
6 laundromats.
And
a chemist.
And a chemist on the corner. And that was about it. There's actually a little bar there now as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, good spot for it.
Yeah, it's a good spot.
It's a good spot.
Unbeknownst to me, I was living around the corner. I was riding my skateboard there to get some mixed lollies. And you guys are
walking out with a slab.
Yeah, you would have been.
It's funny. I know you had Bias on recently, and I know you mentioned to him about the Chopper Reed stuff. And so the slab of Melbourne's that Chopper drank at my house was bought at that bottle too. Yeah.
There you go. What a trip, man.
Yeah. Melbourne Big Mouths.
Yeah. Are we jumping ahead if we talk about the Stages set now? We are a little bit, yeah. Oh. So you've got to so you know all the members. Except for has Jared come into the picture yet?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Yep. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Jared was probably the last member to come in, but I met. So just to quickly brief you, I met Strut through Frenzy, and that was, sort of early 90s. So when we were going to Frenzy's, Strut was going there recording at the same time. So we kind of, we bonded via Frenzy. As far as Rob and Bob, that was through Johnny Idem. Idem Idem had a show on 3CR at one stage, and I think they'd gone in and they'd actually played this demo that they'd done, and he sort of said, "Man, you got to come." They sort of just did their own thing forever.
Yep.
They'd got to the Big Bamboo and that, but they kind of just stayed in their own neighbourhood, I guess.
For someone who doesn't know, just tell us a little bit about the Big Bamboo, because people hear a lot about it. And if you weren't around at that time, you wouldn't know. Yeah,
well, the Big Bamboo was a spot I probably maybe got there half a dozen times. I can't remember how frequently it was on, whether it was weekly or bi-weekly.
No one seems to remember.
Yeah, and it was a Sunday night, I think, too. It was an awkward sort of a night, but it was a mad spot where it was ultimately an open mic for the most part, but sometimes there was organised shows that would go on, or you would organise the crew that was going to rock. And Chrissy was there, and the old mate that ran it, I think his name was Jar Lloyd, and I think Raph might have had something to do with it at one stage as a host or something. But yeah, it was just a melting pot and a meeting place for to let DJs flex and MCs rock and
When there
riders
wasn't
hang
much
out.
on
And
there at the moment.
not much going on, you know. And they were pretty awesome with keeping it running, because that was the other problem at the time. Gigs would start up and shut down really quickly because of the violence. And there was always a lot of shit happening out the front of the Big Bamboo. But, you know, myself included, I got involved in a couple of fracas out there. But it just kept kind of motoring through all this. So it was amazing that it was able to keep running. And, it was good. Gave a lot of guys opportunity. Like, I mean, Rob and Bob is a prime example of a crew that got up but didn't really know anyone at the time. And then we sort of met them around that time through Johnny Item. So
Yeah. And, just sounds wanky, but it's like a networking connection sort of.
100%. Yeah. So guys like Scalp and Scuffle, down with RDC and Prowla and that, they sort of, it was the first time I really got to really hang out with those guys, and a group called RKS, obviously us. Yeah, man. And then all the groups that we all know that went on to keep going. But there's a lot of crews that just did a little bit then and we never heard from again that were cool.
Yeah. Well, times change. People,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of people get into these sort of creative endeavors, realize there's not a lot of money or no money to be made, and then they get out and go, well, I'm going to spend my time doing something else.
Yeah, that's right.
And that happens to a lot of
You
people.
can't blame them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It depends how invested you are, I suppose. I guess the awesome thing about a lot of guys that have been doing it since I have, irrespective of which element of the culture they still practice, is that I feel like there's a and you know, I haven't done a lot lately, you know, well, from a rapping perspective. I've done a couple of pieces and I've done a bit of DJing and a fair bit of production and engineering, but as far as being a face of it or out the front, not a lot. But I think everyone that still stayed that invested were people, I think, that caught the bug maybe at the same time, or when a wave hit and you couldn't shake that bug, you know. It's like, I think hip hop was a culture that became, you know, a big part of people's lives, and so much of their lives that, you know, it'll just live with you forever. You know, whether you're doing one element, two, or all four, I suppose. So.
And even for the people like myself that aren't really in it, but just appreciate it, that they, you know, you enjoy looking at it and just soaking it all in.
Yeah.
And you always will.
Exactly. And I could be a fan forever. If I never picked up a microphone or jumped on the decks or hit a sampler pad or, you know, whatever ever again, it wouldn't matter. You can stay involved as a punter. And that's one of the, I think we've got to a point, oddly, at a period where everyone felt as though they could contribute in some way, and maybe to their detriment and the culture's detriment in some small way.
Yes.
But I think it's fine to just be a fan, man. And I could easily just be a fan, to be brutally honest. I started out as one and probably finished.
But the beauty about hip hop is that it is accessible for everyone to be involved in all capacities or a small capacity.
Yeah.
Like anyone can find a marker and start chucking
That's
tags.
right.
Anyone can bang on the table and start doing raps. Like,
Yeah.
it's so accessible to everybody.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's a good thing.
No, that's right. And I think at the same time, that's why, you know, I tried my hand at it, because I loved it so much. And you could see, you're exactly right. I could easily at school grab this marker out of my pencil case and start bombing the school table or the chair or the dunny or whatever, you know. So, and that's the inroad, and then the rest goes from there. I mean, you don't need to learn. There's a shit DJ and a good DJ. There's a shit producer and a bad producer, but you don't need to learn it. I mean, you have to go through a bit of schooling to learn to DJ and place, you know, to work samplers and stuff. But.
For sure, but I think everything within the hip hop umbrella, like, sure, you can be talented at drawing, which will mean that you'll probably be better at graffiti, but you can also be pretty shit at drawing and work on it and practice and become good at it.
Yeah.
You can be shit at DJing, but you can learn, you can work on it, you can progress and get better.
Yeah.
You know, you may not ever do head spins. That might be tough.
Right. That's right. I think, look, we're all toys at the start, aren't we, really? Whatever our entry level is, how much the rest of the world gets to see how toy you ever were is probably a different story. Some people grab the mic and, you know, now with the accessibility, their first ever recording is broadcast to the world, whereas we had to go through a process again where you had to pay dues and you had to pay money potentially. You had to...
Yep.
It was a bigger process to get to that point where the world heard you.
But this is also another scenario. So, like, obviously, there's the Big Bamboo, and there's places where you can go and jump on the mic, but that also comes with, you have to be backing yourself. You can't just go in there and do it. Now I think there's a lot of these smaller things that anybody with 3,000 followers can get their name on a flyer and get up there, and you may not even really be that good at what you fucking do. You've recorded 2 songs in your bedroom.
Yeah, that's crazy now, isn't it, right? So that's something that, and as much as I've probably been out of it from a participant level to the degree of seeing that in my face every day, I can only imagine the levels that it's gotten to.
Yeah.
with the social medias and whatever else. So.
But people have had to have backed themselves. You had to have probably spat some raps in front of your friends and in front of your people at your school or in front of your peers to then have the confidence to go and do that, People, because there wasn't a lot of people just like recording in their bedroom and then going out there and throwing themselves in front of people.
No, 100%. And one of the biggest things I think as well is, particularly in an era, let's say the Big Bamboo, is that was a pretty intimidating crowd to rap in front of. So to get up and do what you're going to do, you had to be at least accomplished enough to
not get drinks thrown at you.
Not get drinks, 100%, or worse, post getting off the stage.
People come up and go, man, that was whack, and we're going to bash it.
100%.
Really?
Yeah. People didn't like what fucking kicks you had on, or, it was really intimidating. Sometimes beyond, you might have been good as well, but maybe someone didn't like you for another reason, so.
Fucked if it's both ways.
Yeah, it could be.
I want to be good that they like me. I don't want to be so good that they're intimidated, so I'm just going to be a bit mediocre.
Yeah. 100%. I think I've had issues with people throughout at times due to, I had long hair at one stage, okay, I didn't look maybe the part, so someone might have had an issue with that, or, I had a hot missus, someone had an issue with that, or, whatever. You're clutching at straws of a reason to fucking want to staunch someone out, right?
Yeah. And like you were saying earlier, it becomes the fifth element a little bit, is kind of being tough, but it shouldn't really be that.
It shouldn't be like that. And as we mentioned as well, that's not really why the culture started. It was the complete opposite, right? But we went through a phase, I think, where gangster rap and that shit got back came back in via certain means, and then it became ever popular and maybe overstood the real reason why hip hop as a culture started in the first place.
But then, because then battling becomes popular, right? Well, it's always been there, and that was sort of the essence of where MCing came from.
MCing and breaking as well.
It did, but then that becomes a battling, and I'm not a huge fan because it's just very aggressive and just trying to tear people down. But that was a thing that you had to be on guard, sort of thing.
Yeah. And I didn't follow the battle scene massively. I went in a few battles, but I didn't follow it into the 2000s really, like the 2010s, and when it got really big on YouTube and all that sort of stuff. But I was a fan of it, and I was a fan of battle raps because ultimately that's the type of MC I was.
It's competitive.
It's competitive at the end of the day, and you are. Ultimately you are trying to outdo the competition from a battle rap stance. Now, obviously, you got your topics and your messages that you're trying to get across in your songs as well. But for me, a lot of it was about being the best at what we did, and therefore that battle rap element came into play.
And I totally understand that, and I get that, and I understand that that's what fucking rapping is about. You want to be nicer than the other guy. You want to flex your skills better than them. But when the whole thing goes to, I'm just going to call this person a dickhead and this guy's
just said your mum's.
And that is just, I'm like, this is just, it just becomes so fucking cringe.
Definitely.
And I'm like, it's not a fucking who's the biggest cunt.
No.
It's who can rap better.
Yeah.
And you should be able to rap better than them without trying to put them down. I get it. You give them a little fucking punchline here and there. But just
No,
trying to bag someone else, not a thing.
No, it got too blatant, I think. And I like the battles where and some of those battles that I have seen, even the pre-written ones and that, the wordplay is mad, right? And the wit that goes into it is bananas. But when it got to that point where it was just really blatant and obvious and repetitive and... that I wasn't a fan of that.
The best time is when somebody comes out with something and then the other person rebuts that, which that must have happened on the fly.
Yeah.
That's when it's really clever.
That's amazing. Yeah. Really
That's
clever.
the pinnacle of it.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
when people have spent 2 weeks, they know who they're going to battle and they've done some deep dive on
I've
their
heard
social
they've
media.
done like mad research and that about like a whole part, like histories and relationships. It's crazy.
That's not what I'm about. All right, so let's talk about LC again. we kind of went there. You recorded at the padded room or the Trematorium.
we recorded at the Trematorium in Elwood, and well, we were doing shows together. So skip forward. So when my 12 came out and Strut did, so by then my second 12 amateurs came out. Strut's record came out as well, and so we sort of started to tour together. And Rob and Bob were tagging along with us as well. And then I met J-RED through Prowla, and he became, because Prowla was DJing for me initially, and then J-RED came on board as the DJ, and so
He's doing the DMCs at that stage.
Possibly. We got him pretty early on.
Okay.
He'd been DJing forever, but as far as his battle shit, speaking of, I don't know whether he was in the DMCs just yet. But he did some cuts on my second 12-inch, and started DJing live for me.
What year's this? 2000?
Yeah, about 2000. Yeah, so about the time amateurs dropped. So my second 1299 2000, and the Strut Authentic dropped, and then he came on board with us. So then we wanted to put together a bit of a bigger live show. So we'd kind of combine forces, the four of us really, with
Voltron.
Yeah, ultimately, yeah, and J-RED as the DJ. So then we started to tour a bit, Adelaide, maybe Queensland at that stage, and then actually when we went to Adelaide, they got us for the Culture Kings compilation. So we stayed at Debris from Hilltop Hoods' house, and he had this mad studio.
And this is pre The Calling.
Yes.
So this is so they had.
This is around 2000.
So they had the first album come out, but not the one that tips them over.
No, because that came out, I think, just after Stage's set.
Right.
Yeah.
Just to put it into a timeline perspective. So Debris is the DJ for the Hilltop Hoods, but they aren't the nationally known Hilltop Hoods.
So he lived in Adelaide with a guy, PJ from Pulling Strings, who was the Hilltop Hoods management at the time, and they had this mad studio. Anyway, he said, look, this kid Dimes is doing this compilation. I think talks had already, it was well underway as far as a compilation project coming out and what their concept was. And they said, we'd love you to get on it, and we want to do a joint track with you guys. So we'd kind of just newly formed us at like the title Lyrical Commission as a name. And they said, we want to get you guys on, and we'll get J-RED on the decks and on the cuts. And so we went over there to tour my amateurs 12, and then we stayed there because Pulling Strings brought us over there. We stayed at their place. They had the studio out the back. They said, let's jump in and make a track and put it on this Culture Kings compilation, which is coming out. So we did a song called Lyrical Mongrels. Anyway, that kind of then kicked off our LC as a little bit more, basically. So we started doing some bigger shows. We started supporting some international acts.
Yeah. Like who?
Alcoholics. Yeah. So we supported Alcoholics on September 11.
Oh, wow.
So the night
they just found out while you were...
Correct. So Steve Rifkin was there. He came on tour with them, and he got the news, I think, either when we were on stage or just before they got on stage or somewhere around then. It was a really odd night. Actually.
How did they take it? Like, obviously everyone.
I don't know. The show was but I didn't realize. So we were oblivious during our set and post our set. It was a pretty big gig, and it was pretty messy, and everyone had a few drinks, and I just remember, like, at the end of the show, it's pretty crazy to think, because they're obviously dealing with potentially what's going back. I mean, they're West Coast, but Steve Rifkin, I think, was New York. But
it still hits home, like it's...
Yeah, it was monstrous, wasn't it, for everyone, really? And I just remember I had a Heineken and E Swift. I just said to I got E Swift in the band room. I'm like, man, can you sign my Heineken bottle? So I had an E Swift Heineken signed up. He's probably like, well, man, do you know what the fuck's going on at home, and you're bothering me to sign this shit? But from what I remember, it was a pretty messy night. But the gig went well. And yeah, we started to support quite a few acts. We did like Black Alicious. We did People Under the Stairs. Yeah. A lot of those indie acts that came out in that era. And then we just sort of said, fuck. Everyone was kind of saying, you guys going to drop something? So then we were like, well, instead of just forming together to be this commission to do our live shows, how about we actually, and radio spits and all that, we sort of said, how about we get together and put together some sort of project, some sort of physical shit to put out.
And because you've got the studio, because you've got the most knowledge, does that put you in the driver's seat to sort of
100%.
orchestrate
Yeah,
that?
yep. So Elwood was the spot, and I was already toying with production anyway. But yeah, we sort of started to formulate tracks that were going to suit the album and topics, and came over. We'd write a bit together. Everyone would go home and write, come back, and yeah, it was a great process. Really.
And at that point in time, you guys are all like really good mates, so it's all super natural.
Yeah, amazing. That was the best part about it. You know, again, from a process perspective, everything done in house. I mean, there was a bit of writing going at home, but there wasn't even. I didn't have an email. It was all done in house. If it wasn't a phone call to say we need this, this, and this, and this, come over and let's do it. Everything was discussed, sorted, and processed, written right then and there.
Yeah.
And recorded and mixed all in the one spot.
And this is, and I've talked about it with a lot of different guests on the podcast, this is the tipping point for Aussie local rap, whatever you want to call it, because 2000, 2001, 2002, it's not much is happening. It's bubbling off on the surface, but then it all sort of hits mainstream really quickly. People know what it is.
Yeah, well, even when we did the stage set, they didn't, to be honest.
But that is the point where it kind of people start to notice a bit more, and it's
Yeah, I think just post it probably. So we dropped that in December 2002, and I would say I don't know when the Hood's Calling came out, but that was
very
I think
close.
mid 2003 maybe, and then I reckon it spilled over.
It's so like funny to think that like. You know, when we talk about life, there's like pre 9/11 or there's pre-COVID and there's post-COVID.
Yeah.
And with Oz rap, it's like there's pre the calling and there's post the calling.
Definitely, yeah.
Because it just changes everything.
100%, yeah. And it went from to go back to say when we decided to do something, it was just like we were doing live shows together, and it was people were asking, "Is LC ever going to put something out?" And I was like, "Oh, well, let's just put something out for the masses and see how it goes." And I can't remember what we ended up running with but we dropped it on CD first. Literally, I think it was about maybe 13th of December it came out. And I only remember that because I took off overseas to promote it in the UK. And then the wax must have come out maybe Feb, March. But we're talking in the hundreds of copies. Yeah.
And that's why it's still rare.
Yeah, and then we repressed the CDs, and then I don't know if we ever redid the wax maybe once, but maybe not even. But yeah, it's still rare and it's still highly sought after. But when we first did it, it's like
you don't know.
You know, we might be sitting on 100 of those. You know, like, we felt pretty good about it. I'll be honest. Like you know, I thought that it was a pretty dope release for its time.
And you wouldn't think then to sit on copies for yourself because this might be highly sought after. You're just happy that people are buying them, and you're like, take them all.
Yeah, there was no like, I mean, well, there probably was an eBay, but there was no eBay. There was no Discogs. There was none of that shit as far as I was aware at the time. Like, to be honest, my first computer, apart from the Atari 1040 ST, my next computer I only got to make the stages set. So I was still using the digital 4-track, the DR4. And it was a nightmare because I was so limited with when we could bounce, right? So with 4 MCs, you've only got 4 channels in that.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
So you got a left and right stereo channel for the instrumental, and then you've got 2 channels to record all your vocals, all your cuts. Now you can bounce them over, but once you've bounced them, they are stuck there. So if you want to redo it, it's a start again. Yeah. So you're really limited. It's So funnily enough, the brief from the Hoods said, I'll help you out with this program, and he came over to Melbourne and he helped me set it up, and I had a bit of help from Platonic Lab too.
Like, what is it, Logic, Reason?
I actually ended up using Nuendo, which is a visual editing program, I think is what it's made for, but Prowla had started using it and Platonic Lab was using it, and I think maybe Debris knew a bit about it, but...
Technology's changing a lot then as well. Not just with the internet, but you can, like, you know, hard drives are getting bigger, RAM's getting bigger. You can actually do that stuff within the PC.
That's right, yeah. So even just the case of recording your takes, it became like ultimately unlimited channels, right? So we can rather than recording your vocals start to finish, and you're happy with it, and you bounce it over, and then the next guy goes in, and he records start to finish and bounce over. Or now, hang on, I didn't like that now. Oh, it's too late. Oh, now start again then, So all of a sudden we had 4 takes, and you could take the best one. You could take this word out if you wanted and relay it in. You could add backups, multiple backups. You could do, and for J-RED's cuts, it was a fucking lifesaver, man, because, the layers that we did in some of those tracks and the amount of cuts and records that were cut across the course of the LP is bananas.
Yeah, I would have thought that would have been one that would have been easier with the primitive stuff because the cuts aren't that long. But then I guess you've got multiple takes and there's a lot of moving parts.
Exactly. Yeah.
Speaking of Platonic Lab, man, I've asked him to be on this show like a year ago.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, and then we didn't kind of work it out. And then the other day he wrote me a message. He's like, man, I think I'll do it. 12 months, and he goes 12 months later. So hopefully he does it, man.
That would be Lee, yeah. No, he was good, man. Like I'm still, my kids are 14 and 9 and they're already, or 13 and 9 and they're already better than me at technology, right? So I was the worst person. And when I got a computer, it was just like, what the fuck, man? So yeah, thankfully I had dudes come over and help with all that shit. And as far as learning the program, Prowla was the one that taught me it at the end of the day. So I didn't give a fuck about being able to email or the World Wide Web at the time. It was just like, I just want to know how to use this program and get the vocals in, the beat in, the cuts in, and how I can mix on it. So
yeah, essentially it was just a music machine happened to be a computer.
That's right. Yeah, and it was amazing. Yeah.
It's a game changer.
Yeah. And all the production was still done on the S1000 through the Atari ST. So I still did all my beats that way, and then we just tracked them out individually through the mixing desk. But just from a vocal and a mix, wow, the DAW just changed it.
And then you've got stems. You can send them off to be...
Correct.
It's...
Well, as I was saying to you, even just retrieving some stuff a while ago, to dig those discs out and find stems again and stuff was crazy. Yeah.
So then you've got that sort of stuff sitting there. You know that one day, if you want to, you can remix it. You can do whatever.
Yeah.
When you had 4 tracks, you got 4 tracks, and you
That's
can't
it.
take
They're locked
that
and loaded, man. They're locked and loaded.
Game changer for music in general.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it was amazing.
So then you put that one out. It does well for your opinion. You sell out. You're not banking any copies to sell in 20 years' time.
So there was no thought that they were going to be worth $500 or $1,000 10 years down the line or whatever it is. So we sold it all out. Like I said, I think we repressed the CD, and I can't remember if we did the wax or not. I feel like maybe not. And then I went overseas for 6 months. So I went over to promote it in ultimately in England, but a bit of Europe.
Was there a market there? Or you thought there was? You're trying?
This was right on the point where Task Force, Jest were massive in Australia, and Task Force had just come over, I think 2001, and made some good connections and made good friendships, and there was a definite. I mean, that early thousands is when hip hop started to go to shit in the States, in my opinion, and in a lot of people's opinion.
It's where people started to look elsewhere.
That's right. Well, the indie scene was dope though, so it spawned your demigods and your non-fictions and all that sort of stuff, but arsonists. But for the most part, the stuff that you saw outwardly had really gone to shit. It was the era of the blingy sort of,
Record labels were trying to push people in a certain
correct.
way.
And it kind of went to shit. But this London movement, which had kind of caught on in Australia, or not just London, but UK, I think there's a similarity of we had similar interests and similar ideals and similar ideas, I guess.
Yep.
So because they kind of kicked off here through Low Life Records ultimately, which was Brain Tax's label, they'd kind of started to make inroads here, and then through a few other labels that picked up over here, and obviously Task Force toured. I thought, well, maybe it's worth a try, right?
Yep. How'd it go?
Average.
It's worth a try.
Yeah. The funny thing is like when you get to London in 2002 or 2003, it's a massive scene, right? And there's a billion rappers and MCs, and it's fucking...
And the streets, Mike Skinner's popping off then as well, so that's changing the landscape.
Yeah, and we only went from a distribution perspective on a small scale. Like I said, we're only moving 250, 300, 400 here, whatever it is. So I'm not, I'm like, Strut, send me 10 vinyls, send me 20 vinyls. That's it. Yeah. Let's see if we can get them in, And yeah, we got them in consignment in stores. We went into Mr. Bongo, which was obviously the biggest and most famous of all the stores in London at the time, and probably maybe 5 or 6 other stores across England or the UK, right up to Ireland. And then, you're only talking a few units at a time. Yeah. And then we got some distribution through a company over there called Boombox, and they distributed throughout Europe. So then it was a little bit more, but fuck all. But enough to just try to get our name out there. And again, there was no, I didn't go there to think that we were going to make it big. It was more on the fact of, we love what you guys are doing over here. Here, check out what we're doing. That's all it was about at the end of the day.
And there is, look, the Aussie accent's a tough one for a lot of people to palate when it comes to rap, when it comes to out of the country. You go over there, there is a lot of Aussies there. You might have expats. You might have people that are more, into it. But it is a tough market to crack out when you've got,
Yeah, and I think the expat market over there was probably more visible after post-calling. When the hoods with the, had the, I guess, a bit more commercial or semi-commercial appeal. Yep. Then you got people that maybe weren't even into hip-hop in Australia, that are expats over there, and they got into it. There wasn't many expats that were hip-hop heads living in London or England at the time. Yeah. There was a couple which copped it in England, but that was about it.
When I was travelling through Europe in the 2000s, I get people going, I don't like Aussie hip-hop, but I like the Hilltop Hoods. Yeah. You get that stuff and you're like, come on, man. You know what I mean? Like, is that where we're at now?
Yeah. Well, they became an entity unto themselves, I suppose, and they were bigger than hip-hop. They're ultimately one of the biggest music acts out of this country ever, for sure. Irrespective of the genre.
No, and it's kind of, they're sort of a bit like AC/DC, where they're like, are they even rock? They're just AC/DC.
They're just AC,
like they do that. That's what they do. They make that sound, and they just do that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, don't pigeonhole them.
well, that's right. But that, and from a perspective of people who are making local rap though, and talking about the calling, that does sort of open the door. Those guys did open it for people to get onto festivals, to do other stuff like that. So it does change the whole landscape and just get more radio play in general. Yeah,
100%. And I mean, that's it. For the people that really wanted to widen their appeal and their audience, and that was awesome that they did that and opened up that gate for people to do that. And people on their label at the time, and people that maybe fitted more of the mold of the direction with the music they were doing, and to be honest, let's be honest, a lot of people jumped on the style that they were doing more so to probably fit that mold and get that audience and get that opportunity. And that's not what we were about at all. So, I could respect what the Hoods were doing. But yeah, it wasn't us. And like I said, it wasn't about that for us ever anyway. So.
No. And I think just to go into the bat for the Hoods though, I don't think they did that to get commercial appeal. They were just making that music, which then became popular.
100%.
Other people followed suit because they had a blueprint.
Yes. And that's what I'm saying. Respect to the Hoods for what they did. Maybe not everyone that just jumped on that wagon to ride the coattails and get their little 5 cents.
And then you've got a whole lot of emulators that come out. They make the music to get on radio. They're not making it because you make it. And then you guys are just like, no, well, this is what we do. We don't care about being popular.
No,
we're going to sell 400 copies of records.
That's it. That's all it was always all about.
Because it's a vessel to play live shows more than anything.
Yeah. At the end of the day, and I mean, even the live shows was cool. And I think Trem was a bit different to LC. So if I'm, sorry for talking in the third person, but as a solo artist, I was a bit different and I didn't care too much for live shows. But I think the LC sound, was conducive to a live show and a live audience.
And a group dynamic.
The group dynamic, 100%, which is why we formed in the first place as solo artists, or a duo and 2 solos, and then Red was to give it some sort of live dynamic, right?
Yeah.
I think funnily enough, things have gone a little bit 180 now, where I see a lot of rap acts get big crowds that love it, where they're literally just standing there rapping, or maybe that new sort of style with that smoked out, slower BPM, traditional rap, but really slow. It kind of works live, but I think it maybe it didn't so much back then, or maybe that was just in my mind. I don't know.
No, there is different schools of thought, but what you were doing is trying to get a collective of people that could go tour because you're friends that could make a show that was
Definitely.
interesting and hype.
Yeah.
And people weren't used to seeing one dude up on a stage walking around with a microphone. They
No.
were used to seeing bands.
That's right.
So you guys are like, all right,
Yeah.
we need to give them that kind of
Or
experience.
Public Enemy or
Something like that. There's theatrics behind it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then after the first album's done, then you think about doing the second one.
Yeah. So when on my way, I started making beats for it as well.
Had you caught the production bug yet, or are you literally
Yes.
just doing it?
No, 100% caught the bug.
Because it was just, you were doing it out of necessity to start with.
Definitely. Yeah. Yep. So so obviously I had Prowls and Jace help me with those first two 12s. Then once Robbie and I took the studio, our production started to develop. And then once I took the studio off Rob, I was already into it. So when I was working on the Stages set, I was probably fast becoming more of a producer than an MC, right? During in real time during that process.
And you wouldn't have thought that in the early days.
No, I just wanted to be an MC. I mean, I was always buying records, but like as in not just rap records, but buying potentially sample records. But yeah, now the bug was really real. Yeah, so I was trying to make a beat a day, if not more at that stage. So yeah, it was. And then when I was in the UK, I had a lot of time to make music and dig. And over there, a lot of the time I was making beats, but I was also just building sound libraries. So because I was like, I'm eventually going to go home, so I'd buy stuff, sell it, or a couple of tricks. Digitizing it, yeah. And a couple of tricks that Prowls told me at the time was like, go to the libraries overseas because they still have wax in libraries. And like the Birmingham Library at the time, where I stayed up in the Midlands for a bit. I was just renting out records, going home, just flipping bass line, just digitizing it if I wasn't making beats off it. And
even with like an Aussie passport, they let you borrow records.
Yeah. Well, I think I might have used, I can't remember, but yeah, I definitely was. So yeah.
That's a new meaning to library records.
Library records. Yeah. When I say library, I mean the library.
From the library.
Birmingham National Library, whatever it was.
Yeah, but that's definitely, I think, Heater sort of talked about that a bit on his episode as well, where he's just like, I don't know what I'm going to use this for, but I'm going to take it. It's kind of cool, and I could use it for something down the track.
Yeah,
so
and
just stacking them.
Prowls really put me onto that. And once I'd started to digitize stuff, and he taught me about digitizing, so backtracking, the Stages set, the computer was literally just used from a recording and mixing means. So all the beat making was done independently. And then now it started to be like, well, you can actually merge the two. So you can sample, but then if you're not ready to make a beat, you can just pump it through whatever sample you're using, whether it's a S1000, whether it's an MPC, or whether you're just using a program on your computer to just start making sound libraries from the records from the library records from the library.
Now kids have really got it pretty easily because you can just get a million.
Well, they can just do it on YouTube now or wherever they can find some obscure record, right? And from an audio capacity, who knows? I mean, I remember arguing with Prowls about, there was a point where I was like, if I sample this through the S1000 and then put it into my computer, it sounds different to if I just sample it straight into the sound card into the computer. He's like, nah, no difference. And I was like really adamant that, whatever I sample's got to go through a piece of hardware before it goes into digitization. Maybe the most finicky ears could pick up the difference, but
with the right speakers.
That's right. The right speakers.
People consume music now; they're not going to notice.
Exactly, and then how it's mixed and mastered on top of that. Are you really ever going to know at the end of the day? And now, if kids are just listening to music through their phone speaker, who gives a shit at the end of the day? I think about mastering engineers and guys like that. It's like, damn,
Siri, master my music for me. That's basically
How would you like it? Hip hop style, 90s hip hop style.
Crunchy, more bass. So you're banking your samples. you had a stint in the UK. You come back here. You're like, it's time to make a second record. I've got some samples. Are you making tracks before you give them to the rest of the crew to listen to, or are you going, here are some samples, let's piece this shit together ourselves?
I was just kind of making the beats as they were, and then just saying, there might have been 20. What are we all vibing on, sort of thing, and that's how we started. But when we did come back, so the crazy thing is I was gone for 6 months, and we didn't tour the stages set till I got back. So it wasn't until kind of July, August, September 2003 that we actually started to tour. And then we started to see, wow, there's actually
A fan base.
There's a big fan base.
Yeah.
So then by the time 12 months kind of passed, then we were like, well, now we need to give them something else. And that's when we kind of embarked on the next.
And that feeds into another tour then, because another record, you can do another tour.
That's right. So then when we did... so by the time we did Murderous Metaphors, it was a couple of years later, and by now the scene had kind of changed and evolved a bit. But I think even our fan base had grown too, and I can never forget those Murderous Metaphor tours were monstrous. Yeah, I remember. I think the first one we did was Brizzy, and when we stepped out on stage, it was throbbing. It was crazy, and that was kind of another element which I probably never saw or envisioned us ever heading into that realm. But
did you handle it okay?
Yeah, I think we did. Yeah, it was a bit. It's probably a little bit overwhelming to start with, but you sort of pick it up, and I guess there's a bit of an addiction with that once you get into it as well. Once you become comfortable with it, then it's awesome. It's good fun. Yeah. But those first couple of lines are always. I remember. I think that tour I had the first couple of lines of the whole show. So you kind of walk out on stage and there's 800 kids screaming LC, and it's like you got to come in with that first couple of lines. It's pretty crazy, yeah.
But at least you're not doing it solo, man.
Exactly, man. And we always worked really well together on that tip, and we always had each other's backs, and yeah.
And then once you get going and people are digging it, I guess the rest is autopilot.
30 seconds in, you're good to go. Yeah.
And then you let down when the crowds aren't that big. You're like, where's this crowd? Well, because you kind of have that level of expectation.
I remember. So we went from like a show at Brisbane of like, I don't know what it was, two levels at the Rev packed to the rafters, to a gig on the Sunshine Coast where I reckon there was 4 payers.
Really? That brings you back to earth quickly.
Yeah. And the 10 other punters were just locals in the. But actually, that wasn't a LC gig. I think that was a Strut gig. But a couple of years later. But I just thought, how funny is that? Imagine going from this to that. It's funny.
But you see that happening now on a larger scale. There's certain artists, individuals that have been really big, playing huge rooms.
Oh yeah, and then coming back to 100 or 2. Yeah.
Regional tours.
Yeah.
That's how it goes. It doesn't last forever always.
Well, I think about the Beatnuts who played here the other week, right? So imagine the size and scale and scope of the international shows that they would have done in the past.
Yep.
To the Laundry now, right? So it's
but they were always kind of underground.
Oh,
they
yeah,
never crossed over. They had songs that people knew, but I'd say a normal person that's not a hip hop head
true.
would just be like, I don't know who they are.
No, good point. I've just sort of thought they probably would have done maybe 5,000-10,000 venues, maybe. But actually, it's a good point because when I've been lucky enough to go to the States a couple of times, and I remember the first time I went to New York, and we were going to gigs and venues of like my most favourite artists on the planet, Large Professor, Lord Finesse, AG, and there's 20 people there, man. It was like Melbourne 1994.
Yeah.
It was like the Monash gig. And I'm like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like crazy. And this is like 2010, you know?
But it's only the real hip hop heads that are going to be into it.
I was you're right.
But
And the States is completely different, right? It's different everywhere over there. But I was just, it was a real eye opener to think that my favourite underground artists had.
Yeah. But that's the thing with mainstream fans, they'll jump onto something and they'll jump off it really quickly.
Yeah.
So they with things that are underground and things that are, somewhat niche, those people will stick with it.
And they're fans for life, you would think.
But they'll stick with it. When something becomes popular and then they'll jump off it fucking quick because something else has come along.
Yeah.
I guarantee you next time Taylor Swift comes, she's not playing the fucking MCG. Do you know what I mean? Like that sort of stuff.
4 nights in a row.
Bro, or something ridiculous. That's crazy. Anyway, we're not talking about that.
No.
Let's go. So second album drops. You guys tour that.
Yep. Yeah. Big tour, that one. Probably our biggest.
Right.
Yeah. As a group.
And exciting.
Exciting. Yeah. Really exciting. Definitely. All the
Pressure?
excesses.
Is there pressure at this stage?
Probably extra pressure a little bit, but we embraced it. Like you said, we're all together, and it was good fun, man. It was great times. I mean, that's probably where we experienced, or I did, the music industry to a excess at its most. You know what I mean? So,
and that's 2005, 2006.
Yeah, about 04. 05, I think. Yeah, maybe 6. I can't remember when Murder.
So, but that is a big time for not only local rap, but local music in general is popular. Festivals are happening.
Yeah.
There's not everything's digital yet, so people are still buying CDs.
That's right.
So it's really, I don't want to say the peak, but it's probably the peak of music, like dollar grabbing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah. I would say that definitely. Yeah, which probably didn't apply to us so much, but as a general rule, yeah, I'd
Punters
say
are going to gigs, listening to stuff, they're consuming, they're buying music.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I mean, we couldn't name our price, but we could get more to do a gig. That's for sure.
Yep.
Festival
opportunities pop up.
A couple of festival opportunities. Yeah. Not too many, but a few, and that was cool. That was good fun, good experience. More the smaller ones or on the smaller stages and all that sort of stuff. But it's all just a part of it, really.
And that also opens you up to more fans. You know what I mean? When you do those mixed bill shows, that even if they're only smaller ones, there's people there that might be diehards of such and such, and then they see you guys, and then you win them over.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the core of touring, really.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, from a touring perspective, we always had our own things going on as well. So most of our touring was done kind of weekendly rather than, we never did sort of like a week block or a 2-week block.
Everyone's got a life.
That's right. Yeah. And that was the reality of it. We all had, or most of us for the most part, had some form of day job in the meantime.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing that it is a bit sad that a lot of artists, whether it's music or visual or whatever it is, have to have a real job to sustain what they do. And you'd like to think that if they could just focus on the art, then would be better art being made?
Yeah, potentially. Maybe more art, maybe not better. But I also think careful what you wish for, right? Because I think... So I had a little crack at trying to do... And it wasn't just being an artist, but I had the recording label. Mm-hmm. I started up a studio where commercially I was working on other artist stuff. And I had a distribution business. So I had the sort of into JB Hi-Fi for a period. So I was distributing stuff for Checkers, like hospice stuff, Taunce's first CD, our stuff. So that was kind of cool as another option other than the couple of other main labels that were doing that distribution. And because it helped me ultimately, so I wasn't trying to take more off the artist. It was just a case for me to, if I had a little bit of an extra longer catalogue, then it made it easier for me to get our shit into JBs and whatnot. So it was kind of like a finger in about 5 pies and trying to do it. And it was impossible really to live any sort of, comfortable life.
And then you're turning your passion into a job.
Well,
right?
that's the next paragraph. So careful what you wish for. So then it becomes the means to an end where you've got, well, now I have to do this to try to make the money to live off, or are you going to compromise your art, or are you going to rush things, or then the whole process, which I love so much, is gone by the wayside because you're trying to do too much, and the process of making the music and enjoying that and making that what it's all about, it kind of goes out the window because now we got to do it to pay the bills, right?
Yeah.
So that's shit.
That's shit, man. And then at the end of the day, you didn't get into it to be pushing CDs and trying to fucking do spreadsheets and work out all that sort of... Well, you didn't.
Yeah, no. And at the end of the day, for the little catalogue and the little amount that I was doing and the little amount of recording and engineering, even then it still wasn't enough money to really sustain, hiring renting a studio and all that sort of shit.
Yeah, so inevitably you're better off to have a full-time day job to make your art that's not compromised in the meantime.
No compromising in any aspect whatsoever.
And that's what I think a lesson we'll have here for a lot of younger people that want to do things. If you get into any kind of commercial, if you get into any kind of artistic endeavour to try and be commercial, it's the wrong mindset.
Yeah.
do your work on the side and do your art on the side. And if it takes over and it becomes commercial, good on you. But if you go in with a plan to make your art commercial, you're kind of doomed from the start.
That's right. Yeah,
That's
100%.
what I believe.
No, I agree unequivocally. Yep. Done.
Kids, learn it.
Kids, listen up.
Listen up.
Listen to Maloney, man. Listen.
Dropping
jewels, man.
So your band, then your group, your collective, you kind of are going in your different directions now.
So post Murderous and the tour, it was like the plan was to all do a solo. Mm-hmm. So a Trem solo, Brad Strut solo, Bob Balans solo, and we kind of started on a bit on mine and a bit on Brad's, and a little bit on Bob's, and I was handling all the production. So the idea I would produce, record, mix everyone's solos.
Are you still enjoying it?
Loving it. Yeah, okay. Yeah, 100%. So by now I'm out at Elwood, and I'm in. So when I went overseas, I came back, moved around a bit. Now I'm in Carnegie.
Yep.
And Strut was in Carnegie as well. So he was literally 5 minutes walk. So his project started to really become the focus, which became Legend Official ultimately. And we probably smashed out about 3 albums worth of tracks of his alone in maybe a 12-month period. Mm-hmm. And which we ended up making 2 records out of, or two albums out of, and mine kind of took a back seat a little bit for his, because he was smashing it out, like crazy work ethic, crazy artistry, just super quick with it, always keen, and whenever I had 5 minutes spare, he was at the door saying, "Let's record this," and yep. Or I need a beat or whatever, and yeah, so I probably spent a good 12 months just working on that, and that was awesome. I was all in on it, all in on the Legend Official project, and then I can't remember what happened post that. Bob's kind of slowed up, mine slowed up, but I was still making beats for it and writing it, and then yeah, we dropped a mixtape for Strut. We did the Legendary official mixtape, and then he bailed overseas for a bit. And I finished Legend Official, because we were just bulk filling raps at the time, a little bit like the sound libraries. We were just kind of, here's the beat, and then I would just sequence around it or whatever while he was gone, and had it basically ready to go when he came back. I think that's the way it worked. I think, yeah. Again, just testing the memory bank.
Timelines are a bit skewed.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he went right before the finish of making it, and then he came back for the drop.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so that album comes out.
Yeah.
And then you think about doing your own project.
Yeah, well, firstly, I just helped him with the promotion of that and toured with him a bit with it, and
the landscape had changed at this point.
It had, but I was still running the label, right? So that's the other thing I was doing. I was doing uncut recording. So from a distribution perspective, we'd picked up a distributor by then. Shogun was doing our distro, but I was still the label, so I still had a fair bit of work to do on the promo and the push and all that, and then the little bit of tour managing, and then touring with him, and then post that, that's when I was able to knuckle down on mine. And I'm trying to think where we're at in the timeline, but it must be, I don't know when Legend Official might have come out around 2007, maybe 08, I don't know.
Then, yeah.
Yeah, and so then I started on mine basically.
So when you've gone from working with a collective, then working with an individual, then when you're working on yours and you're doing the beats, you're doing the mixing, the mastering, the engineering, all that, is that an odd scenario, just working with yourself? Or is it good?
No, it's definitely an odd scenario. So when everyone leaves the studio and it's just you by yourself, it's completely different. And I started my project, but then we got to a point where I was like, maybe I need to bring in some other producers on this rather than just self-producing.
Are you second-guessing yourself, or you think it actually needed...
A little bit of second-guessing, but also maybe, new raps maybe didn't suit old beats, or, maybe after recording a few tracks, I was like, maybe it needs a bit of extra flavour that would still be in my vein.
Something you may not have thought about?
Yeah, correct. So then I started to put the word out to other producers, and then, started to get that happening, and it kind of gave it a new lease of life.
Who was top of the list?
I don't know who the top of the list was, from probably Prowla, to be fair.
Yeah.
And I think I haven't got the album in front of me, but I think Prowla's probably did maybe 5 of the beats on there, but you know, Omega Man was the first one, which was the first clip that we did to launch the record. And yeah, so it gave it a new lease of life. I was probably a bit stale with it and it's been sitting on some of those beats for quite a period of time, right?
Like years.
That's right. And even though I'd written to them over that period or written parts of songs, you know, just from getting the job done to finishing it, you know, needed something. So yeah, new beats come on board, gave me a new spark, able to write more raps, finish stuff.
Could you have done the whole thing 100% solo? Do you reckon you just would have gone a bit crazy? Like it just.
I probably could have done it, but maybe I wouldn't have enjoyed the process as much again. So coming back to that process, it's probably having that additional external input, you know, drove me or gave me another lease of life in certain ways, you know. So just excited again about what you're trying to do.
Yeah, for sure. And so then eventually you get to drop that, and then you're like, okay, that's sort of. Were you happy to put it out, or are you more like, it's done, you know? Because you've been sitting on it for a while.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, it kind of started as that tape, really, way back with Item.
So it's like you've never really
and then the 212s came out, which again was part of that album, and then the rest of that album kind of got shelved. But then there literally was one track which was changed. Ultimately, the beat changed and the raps changed. But the premise of it was the same, which was called Same Shit. And the chorus was exactly the same as it was on the original tape version. So, you know, however many years later that was. But, yeah, I think I was a bit of a sigh of relief at the end of the day to get it out. And even at the finishing stages, it was almost done when we did Omega Man, which was 2010. So you said the album came out in 2011.
Yeah.
So the whole album was almost done at the end of 2010, and I was like, "Fuck, we've got to get something out." Yeah. So that's when we, you know, hence Omega Man came out as like the first single off it. Me thinking I'd have the rest of it ready to go by mid-year, but I think it took nearly to the end of 2011 before it came out.
Is that because you're a perfectionist?
Yeah, annoyingly, yes.
Really?
Yeah. Or just, you know, there's other words for it. Perfectionist is the polite one.
You're a bit anal? What are you?
Anal, OCD.
Okay.
You know, maybe there's other insecurities that come into it as well, I guess, if you think about it deep down. But yeah.
So then eventually you do release that to the world, and that must be a bit of a sigh of relief. You're like, okay, this thing's been sort of simmering for a long time. I got it out there. I'm happy. Get people like it. Then you go, what do I fucking do next?
Yeah. It was more of a release and like you said, just more of a relief of having it out there. And by the time we did the album, we did another clip. We did Animal Kingdom, and the film clips themselves became such huge parts to the album. I think from now that we'd changed from what say it was in 2003 when we dropped The Stage Is Set to you needed something visual really to accompany your audio now.
Yep.
So
it's a YouTube age now.
Exactly. And as much as me being happy to probably just drop them as tracks or as an album, you know, working a lot with Joshy from a photography aspect, but also visual and Heater by that stage as well. They were like, "No, man, we got to turn this into something monumental." So they really drove the charge from the visual accompaniment to what we did.
And you've got to be stoked because it's a piece of art in there.
Man, amazing. I can't thank those guys enough, man. Like, yeah, it was phenomenal. And Henry Discourse was involved in Omega Man as well, and we spent a lot. You know, he contributed a hell of a lot to that too. So
he would have been pretty young then.
He was, man. Yeah, I think he was just, you know, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and ready to embark on this journey with all of us really and what it was. And yeah, the vision by Joshy and Heater and Henry, yeah, it was fucking amazing, and what they turned it into. Yeah, amazing. I mean, Animal Kingdom was a bit different because we kind of scripted that, whereas Omega Man was, let's find these mad locations and shoot these shots, but then the cutaways and the stuff that they did to tie in the theme of the song, which ultimately is kind of a battle rappy type scenario, or you know, not happy with the state of play in rap at the moment. And this is how it should be for what they did visually, and the to match that, it was bananas
for sure. And in that sort of 2010, 2011 time, the local rap that is popular is pretty fucking cheesy out there.
Yeah.
So you're definitely like, okay, this is going to be a departure from what people are used to hearing from now, what is a genre that people actually know.
Correct.
Like mainstream had sort of taken it on.
Yeah, 100%. So we changed it massively, or we didn't change it. We took it back to what it needed to be. I think. Yeah.
Because it was getting very cheesy.
100%. Yeah.
And whether or not we're going to blame Triple J Ball, people went down that route to get on them. No, I'm not going to blame it, but they did want to sort of, get their music on there.
Yeah.
And it was very... There were some people that were making what was deemed to be Aussie rap, which was just pop music.
Yes.
With some rhyming words.
Correct.
So you were like, nah.
Yeah, no, we weren't about that at all. So yeah, I wanted people to see what it was really meant to be and what it was about. And I think my whole album, although it came out in 2011, was still very much a 90s record. So for those that maybe missed that era, got a modern day taste of what it was about.
Yep.
Without meaning to, because that's just the album I wanted to put out. But I think ultimately it was a bit of a throwback to that era. And
even from a video perspective, then if you did it, you might make a video that a handful of people see on Rage. Now all of a sudden you've got a video you can put on YouTube where people can reference it whenever you want. So whether or not it gets the exposure that you intended to, it's there forever for people to check out.
That's right, 100%. Yeah. So that gave it the exposure. Although getting it on Rage was a pretty big ordeal and amazing for us and for me, and I think for Heater too, and Josh.
And that's a little tick. You're like, okay, people like it enough that it's being viewed like that. Like, let's watch it.
Yeah.
Realistically, how many people watch Rage? Not that many, but it feels good.
No, yeah. I remember sitting up late waiting to watch it myself. So the night it aired. Yeah. It's classic.
So then 2011, where were we? 2011, Animal Kingdom video.
Yeah, so album drops, awesome. Great time. Animal Kingdom, yeah. So all that visual accompaniment that came with it was amazing and elevated it from a release. I think we'd never done any visual backing to anything. We did a film clip for Strut's Monopoly. But besides that, yeah. So this was my first foray into having some sort of accompaniment from a visual perspective.
And it's crazy to even think now that how much that sort of musical landscape has changed, that now you sort of, if you don't have a video, what are you doing? You know what I mean? But for a long time, you wouldn't have even thought of having a video.
No, exactly. So, it was different for me. I mean, I was happy to shy away from the camera and not really be out there like that. I mean, from a live perspective, I understood it, but I'm always been happier to just kind of play the back or be... my missus would probably say the opposite, or maybe people have seen an LC live show, but... that's where I think production and recording, mixing, engineering, and even DJing has probably been something I've gravitated more towards personally, internally, rather than MC, whereas someone like Strut was just a natural, yeah.
But the MC thing, I think, lends itself to a younger sort of person, and as you mature, maybe you want to take a step back. Not for everybody, but for a lot of people.
Unless you're Melly Mel, I suppose. But yeah,
people keep doing it. Yeah, but I think
I agree. I agree with that. Like, I mean, I had a mate whose daughter's having her 18th next year, and she's like, "You got to rap at my party," and I'm like, "I'm not rapping at your party." I'll DJ, no problems, but I'm not.
Do you get people that come up to you every now and then?
Oh man,
you do?
Dude, and it's funny because after moving back to Geelong, and there's not much of a scene over there. There's a little bit, but locally, I'm involved in sports clubs again, and back with my sons coaching, and it's amazing how fast it spread like wildfire in the sporting club about Trem, and it's crazy. And really? I remember I went to coach my eldest, went in Auskick initially, and I'm just full undercover as far as they just know me as Damo, right? And then it was either the junior pres, the coordinator at the time, he's come up to me and he's like, "You've been keeping a big fucking secret from me, haven't you?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about, mate?" And he's like, "Trem." And I'm like, "Oh no." He's like, "Mate, I watched every fucking interview you've ever done. I've listened."
Oh,
He's
really?
like, he's had this 36-hour marathon of listening to every track. that he could find on YouTube at the time. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh no, how's my cover blown? You know? And he's like, I traced your email, I sussed out uncut recordings, and I fucking found you, and rah, rah, rah.
Wow.
And then
Did he care though, or he just thought it was
he
funny?
loved it. Yeah, he thought it was amazing, right?
Okay, yeah.
So then he just, you know, it just spread then. And yeah, for the last 10 years, I suppose, 8 years at the Footy and Cricket Club, most people call me Trem.
Really? It's funny though, because a lot of
even the kids, man. Like I coach 14-year-old kids, you know, under 14s.
Wow.
And they're just like, Trem, what's up, Trem?
It's sick,
yeah.
man.
Yeah, it's funny. It's weird.
Everyone has to have another job, basically. So that does definitely happen. I've had a person on this show who I won't name, who is a real estate agent in their day job.
Yeah.
And their boss, who was 70-something, was up one night and saw him on Rage and rang him. He goes, mate, are you singing? He goes, oh, I'm more of a rapper. So that shit does happen.
Well, I always remember Reason used to say, because he was a teacher and his kids at school were into it. And it was like, man, I didn't even think about the ramifications, the potential ramifications, but also just the relationship you have with your students or your team or whatever it is, as I do now. And now I'm like, oh, it's kind of an awkward scenario. But now the kids are a bit older, they're actually into it and they love it. And that's funny. That's maybe even more awkward, to be fair.
But that's also one thing that you don't think of when you're younger. You're like, you don't think about kids, right? When you're young, you're like, I don't care. And I used to say stupid shit and do stupid shit, and you've only got yourself to be responsible for. As you have kids, you're like, oh, I don't want this to reflect badly on them. I actually had the teacher from the kindergarten that my son goes to. She's like, oh, your son told us that you do a podcast. She's like, I'd like to share a link and put it in the newsletter. And I said, nah.
It's not for that. Yeah.
I said that. I'm like, no. And she's like, no. Look, everyone's pretty open-minded. And I'm like, the most viewed video, the first one they're going to click on, the dude is packing a joint from the start, talking about selling drugs. I'm like, it's just not the best. I don't want that to reflect badly on him.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it, right? So it's always been like that for me. I never even in my day job, I would always go to lengths to not let people know about the rap side or the graph side or the hip hop side in general.
Yep.
And people would inevitably find out at times, and it would come out, or you know. But when you're dealing with kids, whether it's your own kids and their mates and their mates' families, that's one thing as well. That's another thing. But then when you're also coaching footy teams or cricket teams, and it becomes well known amongst the kids, but then the parents and the club at large, it's pretty funny. And I'm sure they'll watch this. Some of them will be watching this.
Watch this for sure. But the most annoying thing I could imagine from your point of view, like you're giving an end of season speech and they're like, oh, you do a rap.
Yeah.
And you're like, no.
100%, man. Yeah.
Like, nah.
And that's what they think it is too. They're just like, yeah, just do a rap, just bust a rap for us.
Yeah,
I'm
just
like,
do a rap about the third quarter when we went wrong.
Yeah.
Like, nah.
Well, even we but yeah, obviously my under 14s team lost to Granny last week, and after the game, you know, everyone was shattered. They'd done so well, but I said at the end, it was like, you know, go home, have your cry in the shower, kick a hole in the wall, whatever you're going to do, and we'll get back down to the club and just get around each other for the amazing season they had done. So when we're down there, the junior coordinator's like playing Trem in the background.
Oh, really? Wow.
So all the parents are catching on there. Like parents that didn't know, now they know, and it's so funny. And then the boys are just like, Trem, bust a rap in there.
There you go. That's cool though.
It's kind of cool. If I think back across the catalogue, I'm like, some things are cool, some maybe aren't, but yeah.
But yeah, and you can't be responsible for everything.
No, that's right.
And one thing is, if they do want to go diving for your back catalogue, they got to have the money to go buy the records, because
that's true. Yeah,
streaming is another thing. This is a good segue into streaming. Not all your stuff or all LC stuff is on streaming services.
That's right. Yeah.
Which makes it hard for people to consume.
Yeah, and a lot of them, probably don't even know about a lot of the back catalogue and stuff like that. But just the fact that they know enough is enough sometimes.
Yeah, well, you can't really escape it.
Nah,
man, I was at my kids' Oz kick, and a dude who I've become friends with since then came up to me. He's like, hey, man, I like the podcast. I'm like, oh, cool, thanks, man. And then we became friends. We've had a few beers and we've hung out. Like,
it's cool.
Yeah, it's cool when people like what you do.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I'll be at a footy game, you know, with either one of my sons, and a parent from the opposition will come up. You know, a young parent who's moved down from Melbourne, or even if they're a Geelongite or someone down the coast or whatever.
Do they know, or they ask you?
Some ask, some might come up and go, you Trem, and then others are like, Trem. and it's like, hey man, how are you? You know,
They just yell and see if you react.
yeah, a little bit like that. Yeah, it's funny.
As long as it's always positive.
Yeah. Oh yeah, every interaction's always positive. So, and even I spoke to the junior president at the footy club. He said to me the other week, he was like, the president, he's like, man, he's like, has he spoken to you yet? And I'm like, nah. He's like, man, he caught on to who you are in the rap world and he's all over it. He said he sent me a text the other day and he's saying, how's the names Prowla, Ransom? You know, and these guys are like totally come from a non-hip hop background here or non-graph, non-music, you know, and they're just this. It's a bit of a novelty for them, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. I say to like my dad, I'm like, oh, you know, I'm going to do this, and then these guys are going to do some raps. And he actually, at first, thought people were making like chicken raps.
Oh, for
raps.
real?
Like he go, wow. And I'm like, no, they're going to rap. He's like, oh, he didn't even know. Like some people are just,
yeah. That's a far way off, isn't
it? They're gonna make raps like we're gonna eat them. I'm like, anyway. That's how out of it is. Yeah. Talking about the streaming stuff, is that potentially something that can happen, or it's just there's too many
from the old stuff, like the LC stuff and that?
or even your early stuff.
Yeah, maybe my early stuff. So I've got a fair bit of stuff that's been lying dormant in the works for quite some time, including a little bit of a rehash of some of the early works, which I won't go into too much about now, but looking to hopefully drop that early in next year. In a certain way, so there might be some potential for that to happen.
Yep.
It'd probably be more in a physical form, but there might be some streaming backup somewhere along the line with it.
When the footy club run out of songs to play, you're gonna have to do something.
I know they can only play Animal Kingdom so many times. And as far as the LC goes, maybe there's a fair few machinations and working parts to get through that, but never say never, maybe.
And next year, 2025, it's a 20-year anniversary of the last record.
Oh yeah, it is too. Yeah.
Nothing lined up for that. I'm trying to.
No, I think I had enough phone calls on the 2022 when it was the 20-year anniversary of Stages Set. So yeah.
Okay.
No, unfortunately not, mate. Yeah.
Nothing's happening.
Never say never.
Never say never. Okay. Sadly, unfortunately, because we've got a timeline, we're going to have to start to wrap it up, which sucks, and I'm sure we could talk for a lot longer. But do you want to sort of tell us what else to expect from you coming up? If they're, you're kind of you're doing your thing, maybe you're just taking it easy. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, well, there's firstly, I want to apologise to a couple of. So, in the since my record, a lot of the stuff I did was either production based. Or recording and mixing more so, and whole projects. A couple came out. Obviously, Kings Connected, one of the big acts on my label that I spent a shitload of time on and working with those guys, and we kind of forged great friendship, personally, but also musically. And I was really heavily invested into what they've done. And we kind of embarked on a couple of projects at once. Corrupted Citizens came out, but then the next two projects sort of underway. So one of them is like literally completely done bar mastering and has been for a while. So it's, literally it's there to put out.
Yep.
So that's coming out. There's a couple of Trem projects, is the one I was alluding to, but then there's also instrumental stuff that I've done that's kind of just waiting to be put together.
Some library records on there.
Yeah. And then speaking of that, so kind of almost like what we did with Heaters Library 45 as an accompaniment to Executions. So working with Heater, we want to do another project together. That was amazing. I love that project. Was the most fun thing I've ever worked on in my life, to be honest. So
we're going to get Heater in here and you, and we're all.
That would be dope. Yeah. That would be real dope. But yeah, for him to just kind of come with these little snippets he did literally with his MPC and his VHS and ultimately a tape deck basically, and said, played the tape, what do you think? And I'm like, man, we need to turn this into a whole project. So yeah, more with Heater and my man P-Link. I don't know if you know P, but he's done a whole album with me, which again, a bit like the other Kings Connected project's been sitting there on the shelf waiting to drop for some time. So I owe him a massive apology as well. We both, life stuff's gotten in the way for both of us over the past couple of years, but it's a ripper album, like literally just sitting there waiting for mastering. So there's a couple of projects that are like literally waiting to get there, and I've been obviously tied up with life stuff and work and family and coaching
stuff, life. Yeah.
And so have they, to be fair. Everyone's had their own shit going on, but it's probably on me to just go, let's just get this shit done and over the line. So there's a fair bit in my hands that is just waiting to get thrown out to the world. So.
I'm sure you'll get to it.
100%. Yeah, definitely. Looking forward to it, actually. So, yeah.
Is there anyone you want to kind of shout out as we wrap it up? You've obviously mentioned a lot of people, but anyone you just want to give a quick thanks to?
Give a shout out to everyone that's supported me and everything that I've done. There's way too many to mention, but we've mentioned a lot along the way, and there's a lot more I could always give a shout out to. Obviously, to those guys that's projects are ready to rumble. We'll get them out this year. We'll get them out for sure. And thanks to you, mate, for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming.
It's a real privilege to come on board, and big supporter of everything you're doing with the podcast. And, still keep it as Melbourne as you can, but give love to those other states and cities where
we've got to grow. We've got to grow a little bit.
Yeah, I know, man. Yeah. I know. But otherwise I mightn't have been on here. So yeah.
No. We've got to grow. Well, actually, while you mention that, who would you like to see on this show? Let's name check them now, so I can use that as some bargaining power to get them on.
All right, get Briggs on.
Michelle Grace Hunter asked him. He said he's not interested.
Okay.
Maybe I could get heated to ask him.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. You went the wrong route. Get heated.
That was it was 12 months ago.
Yeah. 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 I got a list.
Yeah.
You reel them off.
Yeah.
Y'all know what your answer's going to be for most of them.
No, we'll tell you.
Get Strut on here.
Yep.
If you can.
I've asked him, and he said similar thing to you. He said never say never.
All right. DJ Breeze.
Okay. Yes.
Absolute OG.
Yep. Someone has been championing me to get him on, but I haven't done it yet. Yes.
Ransom.
Yeah, I've asked him. He said he's not interested.
Okay.
He said he's not interested. Some people who I've asked aren't interested in the visual aspect.
Yes. Who else have we got? Prowla.
He's not here at the
That's
moment.
just dumb. Yeah. Who else?
Shan.
Not much love. Shan Frenzy.
Yes.
That'll happen.
Look down the
Shan,
camera.
get here, mate. I want to see you sitting in this seat just when I'm not.
That's good, yeah.
Apart from that, mate, thanks again. Really appreciate being on here. Actually, big shout out, big shout out, South Bowen under 14s team Amos. Bad luck we didn't win the flag. We'll be back next year, boys.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah.
Man, I appreciate you coming. You are the 100th guest, and I'd like to say hopefully you'll be back again, because we did do about as much time as we could fit in, but we've still got more to talk about.
Yeah, plenty to talk about.
And
I want to get into the Connected Boys and Heater and those other projects.
For sure. And we just simply ran out of time, unfortunately. But yeah, that'd be sick to get, and maybe even do some sort of ones with multiple guests. Maybe we can get you and Heater and do some more fun stuff. So, man, I appreciate you being the 100th guest. You're a legend. You came a long way, and I appreciate it.
Happy 100th, mate.
Raise the bat.
Raise the bat.
Cheers.
2000.